The Speaker of the Senate has ordered for the quorum bell to be rung. This is part of the standing orders of the Senate, where it states that the quorum of the Senate or the Committee of the Whole shall be 15 senators. The quorum at commencement of the sitting of the Senate. If there is no quorum present when the chair is taken at the time appointed for the sitting of the Senate, the Speaker shall immediately after the prayer order the bell to be rung for 3 minutes. If no quorum is present at the expiration of the 10 minutes, the Speaker may direct that the bell be rung for a further 10 minutes, and if there is still no quorum present, the Speaker shall adjourn the Senate forthwith to the next sitting. Just to continue to recap in the order of business that is expected this afternoon, there's a motion of incorporation of the intelligent water management system in building plans for sustainable living. This is a motion by the Senator Wahome Wamatangi MP, that aware that water is an essential yet scarce resource whose demand is increasing rapidly due to population growth, urbanization, and industrialization, and whose wastage has become an issue that needs to be addressed urgently owing to Kenya's vulnerability to climate change, and noting that there is growth in the number of buildings coming up to accommodate the rapidly growing population, thereby posing a challenge to water management. Appreciating that the incorporation of water management system in building plans, including a variety of techniques and technologies such as rainwater harvesting, wastewater recycling, low-flow plumbing, and sensor system that detect leaks and deactivate water flow when necessary, thereby optimizing the use of water by eliminating water over exploitation, waste water management, and pollution. The motion goes ahead to say that now, therefore, the Senate urges the Ministry of Lands, Public Works, Housing, and Urban Development in coordination with the Council of Governors and the National Environment Management Authority to incorporate into the building code and standards a requirement for intelligent water management system in all building plans, and undertake a systematic nationwide renovation to government-owned buildings to incorporate water management system. This will be a resumption of debate interrupted on Wednesday, 14th June 2023 during the morning sitting. There's a balanced time of 1 hour and 23 minutes. Also, another motion to be deliberated today in the Senate is a motion report of the Senate delegation to the 67th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, held in New York from 6th to 17th March 2023. This is a motion by Senator Fatma Dulo MP that the Senate notes the report of the Senate delegation to the 67th session of the Convention of the Status of Women, held in New York from 6th to 17th March 2023, laid on the table of the Senate on Thursday, 29th June 2023. Also, a notice that will be before the Senate this afternoon. The Senate resolves on 15th February 2023 as follows: that pursuant to Standing Order 111.1, the Senate resolves that debate on a motion not sponsored by the majority or minority person or a committee shall be limited to the following manner: a maximum of 3 hours with not more than 20 minutes for the mover, 20 minutes for the majority party official responder, 20 minutes for the majority party official responder, the quorum seems to be achieved at the Senate. I will hand you over for the continuation of the live broadcast. My name is Doris Getonga. Do enjoy your viewing.
Clerk, proceed to call the first order, please.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.
Honorable Senators, I hereby report to the Senate that a petition has been submitted through the clerk by supply chain management assistants concerning the discrimination against other health workers in the Ministry of Health. As you're aware, under Article 1191 of the Constitution, and I quote, "Every person has a right to petition Parliament to consider any matter within its authority, including enacting, amending, or repealing any legislation." Now, Honorable Senators, the salient issues raised in the said petition are as follows. 1, that supply chain management assistants currently working in the Ministry of Health in the county governments are employed by the Ministry of Health and offer essential services such as receiving, storing, and issuing pharmaceutical and non-pharmaceutical items, among other duties. 2, the supply chain management assistants work on weekends, holidays, and on emergency duties without any allowances. The supply chain management assistants are not considered in the distribution of allowances of those who are working in hospitals, despite the Compendium of Remuneration and Benefits for the Public Service, December 2022, requiring all health workers, including the supply chain management assistants, to receive health service allowances and extraneous allowances. That the petitioners have made all efforts to have this matter investigated and resolved, but the relevant bodies whose responses have not been satisfactory. That none of the issues raised in this petition are pending before any court of law, constitutional, or any other legal body. The petitioners therefore pray that the Senate, 1, takes the necessary steps to ensure that supply chain management assistants working in the Ministry of Health at county level are given health service allowances and extraneous allowance. 2, compel the ministry to come up with a strategic way of identifying all supply chain management assistants currently attached to the health departments. And 3, takes the necessary steps and ensure there is no discrimination of any form against other health workers working in the Ministry of Health. Honorable Senators, pursuant to Standing Order 237, I'm supposed to give a leeway for senators who wish to make any intervention on this for 30 minutes. However, there is a petition report by JLAC Chair, which I will allow that to happen, and thereafter I will allow 15 minutes for any intervention on this particular petition. So as I resume my chair, I'll call the chair, JLAC, to proceed to give us his petition reports.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to lay the following petition reports on the table of the Senate today, 19th of July, 2023. Mr. Speaker, report of the Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs, Human Rights on a petition to the Senate by Mr. Nayan Savla concerning the delay in developing and launching a victims' rights charter as provided for under the Victim Protection Act number 17 of 2014. And Mr. Speaker, second report of the Standing Committee on the Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights on a petition to the Senate by Mr. Paulo Mutembei, and 19 others concerning historical injustices suffered by the Torobek community. Mr. Speaker, these two petitions, or rather reports, have been at length dealt with by the committee. And Honorable Speaker, in the first petition, that is by Mr. Savla Nayan, this was reported in the House on 3rd of May, 2023, and it was thereafter committed to the Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs, and Human Rights for consideration. Mr. Speaker, the salient issue in the petition relates to the failure to develop, launch, and operationalize a victims' rights charter as required under Sections 19.4 and 32.2 of the Victim Protection Act number 17 of 2014. Mr. Speaker, ancillary to these were questions on the establishment of the Victim Protection Board as an unincorporated body and the operations of the board since its establishment in the year 2016. Mr. Speaker, in considering the report, the committee met with the petitioner where we sought to establish and understand the background to the petition. The committee further, as a victim, or rather the petitioner as a victim of crime, he felt that he would have received much better assistance from the state if the operations of the Act had been operationalized. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Salva, as I've said, was a victim of crime, and he sought for support and assistance from the relevant government agencies, and it was unfortunate that he was unable to be assisted, thus leading to his option to approach this House in form of the petition. The committee further engaged the Office of the Attorney General and Department of Justice, who submitted written responses to the petition. A summary of it, Mr. Speaker, that was received had the committee committing itself in deliberating on the same. Mr. Speaker, having considered the submissions by the petitioner and the response by the Office of the Attorney General, the committee made various observations which are set out at Chapter 3 of this report. I will definitely not go through each and every chapter of this particular report. And of importance, Mr. Speaker, is the observation that the committee did arrive at, including one, that the regulations to establish the Victim Protection Trust Fund were yet to be approved by the National Treasury under the Public Finance Management Act, that is Act number 18 of 2012, and that victim services were yet to be rolled out across the counties as envisioned under the Victim Protection Act. Honorable Speaker, arising from those observations, among others, the committee made two key recommendations. One, Mr. Speaker, is that the Office of the Attorney General and Department of Justice to set up a working group on implementation of the Victim Protection Act, Act number 17 of 2014, including to review the draft Victim Rights Charter, the draft Victim Protection General Regulations and Victim Protection Trust Fund Regulations, and to submit a status report to the Senate within 3 months of tabling of this report. Secondly, that within 6 months of tabling of this report, the Office of the Attorney General and Department of Justice to submit the Victims Protection General Regulations and the Victims Protection Trust Fund Regulations for approval by the National Treasury under the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and by Parliament under the Statutory Instruments Act 13. Mr. Speaker, in terms of what the committee and this House can do, the committee undertook, and it indeed committed itself to initiate a review of the Victim Protection Act to address the textual conflict between Section 19.4 and Section 32.2 of the Act, as well as Section 31, which is requiring incorporation of the victim protection as an incorporated body. The committee further, Mr. Speaker, undertook to commence a comprehensive post-legislation scrutiny exercise on laws enacted by Parliament which are yet to be fully implemented, focusing on laws within the thematic mandate of the committee. Mr. Speaker, this was informed by the desire to ensure that whatever laws that we enact in this House, they are followed up for purposes of implementation, because the business of this House is not just to ensure laws are enacted, but to ensure that the laws which have already been enacted indeed serve the purpose with which they were put before the House for enactment. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, allow me to thank the members of the committee for their diligence and insights during the consideration of this particular petition. I also wish to thank the petitioner for bringing this matter to the attention of the Senate, as well as the Office of the Attorney General for the submissions made in the response to the petition by the Office of the Attorney General. Lastly, I wish to thank the officers of the Speaker, Mr. Speaker, your office, as well as the Office of the Clerk, for the support that was accorded to my committee during the deliberation of this particular petition. Mr. Speaker, it is now my pleasant duty, pursuant to Standing Order number 238-2, to present the report of the Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights on the petition by Mr. Nayan Savla regarding the delay in developing and launching a Victims' Right Charter. Mr. Speaker, I beg to table. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, allow me also to highlight on the second report of the committee, that is on the petition that was submitted to the committee by one Mr. Paulo Kiprotich Mosbey on behalf of the Torobek community, that was reported to the Senate on the 22nd of February, the year 2023, following which it was committed to the Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights for consideration. Mr. Speaker, the salient issue in the petition relates to the eviction of members of the Torobek community from the Mau forest and other forests across the country, without either being resettled or compensated. The petitioners also alleged to have been systematically marginalized and discriminated against by the colonial and subsequent governments, including in access to employment opportunities and government services. The petitioners therefore prayed that the Senate intervenes by ensuring that the community is recognized and treated fairly as other Kenyans, and in the case of the ancestral lands that they allege to occupy, that they have lost through evictions, that their members and members of their families and the community at large be resettled, if not be compensated. Honorable Speaker, the petition facilitated the committee members to conduct a site visit in Molo sub-county in Nakuru County, where it met with and listened to first-hand accounts of the petitioners and their representatives. This was to enable the committee, Mr. Speaker, to understand who the community are, where they are found, the plight of the community, the interventions they have sought so far, and whether the same have been successful, and the remedies that they were seeking from the committee and from this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, the committee subsequently held meetings with the National Gender and Equality Commission and considered written responses submitted by the Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights, the National Land Commission, and the Office of the Attorney General. All these are summarized in the subsequent chapters of this particular report, which for purposes of my tabling today, Mr. Speaker, I will not get into them. Honorable Speaker, having heard from the petitioners as well as the other stakeholders, the committee made various observations which are set out in Chapter 3 of this report. This relates to the claim of marginalization and discrimination of the Torobek community, the question of resettlement or compensation for loss of their ancestral land, the delayed implementation by the Kenya government of the judgment of the African Court on Human and People's Rights on the Ogie case, and the failure by the Constitutional Commission on effective discharge of their mandate. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee was particularly concerned that the historical land injustices claimed by this particular community has been pending at the National Land Commission since it was admitted to consideration in the year 2021. Had it been addressed, then the petitioners would not have had to approach the Senate on the same matter. The committee was also concerned that while the National Gender and Equality Commission has been in existence for over a decade now, it's yet to come up with guidelines on how to evaluate who qualifies as a minority or marginalized community, and is further yet to document and map the minority groups and marginalized communities in the country. Honorable Speaker, arising from the observations on the petition, the committee made 3 key recommendations. One, Mr. Speaker, is that the National Land Commission expeditiously investigates the issue of historical land injustices against the Torobek as submitted by the petitioners and admitted by the Commission under file reference number NLC HLI 1117/2021, and the Commission to submit a status report to the Senate within 3 months of tabling of this report. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, that the National Gender and Equality Commission works with the Ministry of Interior and National Administration and other relevant government agencies to facilitate the recognition of the Torobek community by, 1, issuing with a unique identification code, 2, recognition as an ethnic community in Kenya, and 3, to submit a status report to the Senate within 3 months of tabling of this report. C, Mr. Speaker, that the National Gender and Equality Commission undertakes investigation on the complaints relating to human rights violation, discrimination, and marginalization of the Torobek community and submit a report to the Senate within 3 months of tabling of this report. Honorable Speaker, while indeed this matter is live before the National Land Commission and following the interventions by the committee before the National Gender and Equality Commission, the Standing Committee on JLAC will follow up on a quarterly basis to ensure that justice is done for the members of this particular community. Mr. Speaker, allow me to thank the members of the committee for their diligence and insights during the consideration of this petition, and also to thank the members of the Torobek community for bringing this matter to the attention of the Senate and for the submissions made when the committee visited Molo. I further wish to thank the Office of the AG, as well as the commissions mentioned earlier who presented written submissions or appeared before the committee. I wish to thank your office and the Office of the Clerk for the support that was accorded to the committee. And now, Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasant duty and pursuant to Standing Order 238-2 to present the report of the Standing Committee of Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights on the petition by Mr. Paulo Kiprotich Mutembei regarding the historical injustices suffered by the community known as Torobek. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay. And as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, just to highlight, particularly with regard to the second report of the petition, this is a live issue that is currently being undertaken by the National Land Commission, that there is an issue that has already been submitted by the community to them, it's live. And secondly, the concern which the committee picked has this morning been dealt with. We had a meeting earlier on this morning, Mr. Speaker, with the African Court of Human and People's Rights. We had the President and the Vice President together with the Registrar, where among other issues which we discussed included the requirement of the government of Kenya, where they are seeking our intervention as a House, to submit the document of acknowledgement of our country as a member and a participant in order to ensure that Kenyans can directly access the court so that issues to do with injustices, like in this particular case, can be taken to that particular court for purposes of adjudication, and also to ensure that we bind the government in order to ensure that whatever pronouncements made from that court in form of judgments or directive to the government is put to task to implement. Concerns and petitions against historical injustices are very many. It is not only the Torobek clan that is suffering. So many other Kenyans are landless, are homeless. Why? Because of historical injustices, including places like Mau, or even areas like the national concern that we've had the other day from Kericho, where the communities who had their ancestral land within the multinational estates are having petitions all across without a direct ability of them to ensure that they seek and get justice within reasonable time. It would make no sense for someone to fight for a whole century when they know that even if I had achieved a right, the government of the day that fails to implement will not help such a person. And Mr. Speaker, as I lay this report, I ask the House and members of the committee whom I have a lot of respect and acknowledgement for the support. I ask them to ensure that the commitments that the committee has made be followed in order to ensure the implementation and to ensure the interest of justice is served on the petitioners who've come to this House because they expect that their concerns and the injustices that they've suffered over the years can only be achieved if this House intervenes in the form of the petitions that they have submitted before us and the reports that we have. Mr. Speaker, I thank you as I submit.
Senator Cheptumo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to support the petition by the supply chain management assistance. And Mr. Speaker, the issues raised by this group of staff is indeed very genuine. Mr. Speaker, these are members of staff employed by the ministry and posted to the counties. And Mr. Speaker, there is a clear breach of public service provision where in 2022, as said in this petition, that the compendium of remuneration and benefits for the public service requires that all health workers are actually paid some health service allowances. Mr. Speaker, it is indeed sad that members of staff who do very, very sensitive functions in the counties, like the ones now in the the Department of Health, are not being paid allowances. Yet their fellow colleagues, again, Mr. Speaker, are receiving allowances. It is inconsistent with the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. It's unfair. And Mr. Speaker, this is an area where if there is clear breach of these provisions by the ministry, I think, Mr. Speaker, even those responsible should be brought to book and be able to be punished. And Mr. Speaker, it is important that the committee in charge, and I think this is being done by, I believe you will give directions to the Committee on Health to be able to be very clear. And Mr. Speaker, I want to support this and say Senate health is devolved. It is our function, Mr. Speaker, and this is our function to ensure that those staff are indeed paid their health service allowances. It is their right, Mr. Speaker, and they should be paid. I support.
Senator Kenyo.
Asante Bwana Spika kunipa fursa hii. Nasimama kuunga mkono hilo dua iliyoletwa Bwana Spika na hawa wafanyikazi wanaosimamia ugavi katika vituo vyetu vya afya Bwana Spika. Ni ukweli Bwana Spika, katiba yetu inasema dhahiri shahiri hakuna mtu anapaswa kubaguliwa Bwana Spika. Wamesema vizuri katika ombi lao ya kwamba wanabaguliwa ilhali wanahusika kwa mambo manufaa katika hospitali zetu Bwana Spika. Wao ndio wanaopokea, wanahifadhi Bwana Spika. Hata vile vile unapata wanasaidia katika ile hali ya kupeana dawa Bwana Spika. lakini ikifika ni mambo ya kulipa marupurupu yao Bwana Spika, hawaangaliwi, wanawekwa kando Bwana Spika. Na ni vizuri kwa sababu kazi wanaifanya, wanafanya hata kazi za dharura Bwana Spika, wanafanya kazi hata wakati wengine watu hawayuko Bwana Spika, wanakuja kazini hata mwisho wa wiki Bwana Spika, wakati wafanyikazi wengine hawayuko katika kazi Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo wanafanya kazi ya muhimu. Lakini ikiwa wao watabaguliwa katika gatuzi zetu Bwana Spika, itakuwa ni jambo la kuvunja moyo sana Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo naunga mkono hili ombi waliloleta Bwana Spika, liangaziwe kwa kindani na lishughulikiwe Bwana Spika na kamati ya afya ambayo najua inaongozwa na seneta ambaye amejitolea na tunamjua amefanya kazi yake vizuri Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo hawa ndugu zetu ambao wanafanya hii kazi ya kusimamia ugavi waweze kuangaliwa Bwana Spika na waweze kupatiwa kilicho chao. Asante Bwana Spika.
Senator Charanke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. On the petition number 1, Mr. Speaker, I remember early this year or late last year, I brought a petition on universal health coverage workers. I'm happy the Ministry of Health and Public Service Commission did renew the UHC contract for extension of 1 year to 3 years. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think it behooves all of us that working for public service, there should be certainty, Mr. Speaker, sir. And therefore, I appeal that there is another crop called CHEP, those ones who are at the ports, especially during COVID lockdown, like we to work to entry points in the country, like airports, like border points, Mr. Speaker, sir, they must also be observed. Even alongside this supply chain management assistance also, they must be observed, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to call upon the Labour Committee led by Senator Murgor. I have seen there is a council that has been formed to try and resolve crisis that is facing the health sector in this country. One thing we should note as a Senate is that, Mr. Speaker, this is a devolved function. We need the Labour Committee to take lead, and I expected when that council was being inaugurated, I would have expected the chairman of Labour or a number of members, including yourself, or even representatives from the leadership of the House to be in that meeting, Mr. Speaker, because we need to ensure, and this culture, you know, it is, while I agree, the biggest elephant in the room, Mr. Speaker, is SRC, Salaries and Remuneration Commission, because they have never assisted in ensuring that the issue of UHC, the issue of CHEP, the issue of this assistance within the Ministry of Health can be addressed, Mr. Speaker. So I call the Labour Committee, the Committee of Health, to take charge and ensure that health is really devolved, Mr. Speaker, sir. On the second, Mr. Speaker, a report by the Jailer Committee in quick succession is that, Mr. Speaker, we need to ensure there is victims protection unit that should be active, and it should be under Attorney General's office, especially, Mr. Speaker, to fight the issue of white-collar crime, issues of corruption, issues of extrajudicial killings, Mr. Speaker. I've seen assertion by our colleagues who are not present today in the House that police are killing Kenyans. It is the other way around. It is criminals that are killing Kenyans, and the police are doing a fantastic job, Mr. Speaker, even as they try to protect lives and property across the country, especially in this city, Mr. Speaker. So I think we need this victims protection unit so that people who want to testify, Mr. Speaker, and you being a learned senior, Mr. Speaker, understand the role of victim protection unit in this country. And finally, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of historical injustices, I want to say in quick succession that in the last session, Mr. Speaker, there was an allocation of 10 billion Kenyan shillings as a restitution to many of the victims that were suffered historical injustices. Mr. Speaker, I would have expected the chair of JLAC, and it looks like, Mr. Speaker, I didn't do proper handing over, to push for allocation of 10 billion shillings to ensure I have the Koitalel Samoe issue, Mr. Speaker. We have Mekatilili Wamenza, we have the issue of Mau Mau, where Senator Kinywa comes from, Mr. Speaker, and even others, and even large historical injustice in Kericho and Bomet counties, Mr. Speaker. I want to request the chairperson and the jailer committee to push for allocation of 10 billion Kenyan shillings to restitute not only Koitalel Samoe, or Megatili Wamenza or the Mauma, but every Kenyan that suffered an historical injustice. So while we agree with the recommendations that have been made about resettlement, about looking for more land for this, the Ndoropek community, Mr. Speaker, let us also ensure there is a budgetary allocation, just the way we did it for the IDPs and other people that have suffered an injustice in this country. Mr. Speaker, with those very, very many remarks, I thank you and I support both the petition and the report that has been tabled by the committee.
The Honorable Senator Danson Mungatana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the second petition. This is the one that concerns the delay in developing and launching a victims' rights charter as provided for under the Victim Protection Act number 17 of 2014. Mr. Speaker, this petition is critical. It's critical because what has been happening in the criminal justice system, for those of us who have been practitioners of the law, is that a person files a complaint with the police, it's investigated, and maybe it is something like arson, which is destruction of your property. Mr. Speaker, then a conviction is obtained and the person is just jailed. The victim is left there with nothing. The only remedy, Mr. Speaker, that that victim gets is the satisfaction that the person who committed the act against the victim has been jailed. But in reality, this victim gets nothing. Mr. Speaker, under the Penal Code, there is a very small provision which talks about restitution of victims after they have suffered violence, criminal violence. Mr. Speaker, this particular charter, if it was implemented in accordance with the Act, people who have suffered and have been subject to problems that are associated with the criminals, they would receive something back. They would be restituted. Mr. Speaker, the Kenyan system has never really restituted people who have gone through this problem. Mr. Speaker, the Parliament, in its own wisdom, passed the Victim Protection Act number 17 of 2014. But the charter, which is the subject of this particular petition, is the one that really, really champions the rights of the victims. And Mr. Speaker, many Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, someone is beaten up, subject to domestic violence, and then maybe the DPP enters a plea, there's a plea bargaining that happens, because maybe someone is the husband of someone. If he's jailed, the children are left hanging. So then what happens is, because of all those considerations, someone just walks out, and the wife who was beaten doesn't get anything. Mr. Speaker, it happens in many, many situations. I have given the situation of arson. I have given the situation of theft. I have given many examples, Mr. Speaker, exist within the criminal justice system where people then decide there's no need, I have forgiven. But really, it's because the system is not assisting people to achieve what is restorative justice. So, Mr. Speaker, I pray that this report be implemented to the letter. Kenyan people need to see the system working. We know that when the system works, then people are able to have faith in the system. Mr. Speaker, right now, we have seen that just out of yesterday's violent protests, media reports are showing at least 6 people have died. These people, Mr. Speaker, died because someone, somewhere, wanted to call for changes in the Finance Act without using constitutional means. Mr. Speaker, the opposition, our colleagues here, have decided that they will operate outside the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, our colleagues have decided that Kenya should not be a state. The way we agreed to be governed, so that we move out of the state of nature, according to Thomas Hobbes, the English philosopher, that we need to agree as a state that we will operate within certain laws. Now, some people don't want to be governed by institutional authority. Mr. Speaker, as a result, people have died. Houses have been torched. Mr. Speaker, businesses have lost, and the fear that has been inculcated in people, businesses are not opening. And Mr. Speaker, there is criminal liability to this. The victims are the people of Kenya, many of them who cannot speak. And because the system is not responding to them, they just say, it's okay, I forgive. It's okay, it's politics. But it's not politics, Mr. Speaker. So I pray that the report will be taken seriously, it will be implemented. And Mr. Speaker, it should go as far as insisting that those people who are culpable, they must pay back. And criminal justice system should go to the point of saying, yes, the house that was burnt, because they always value it in the charge, an estimated value of 300,000 shillings for that house that was burnt. The kettle that was stolen was worth this amount. The criminal justice system should go not only to jail, it should go to the extent of saying the victims must be restored. The criminal justice system in Kenya must activate this act, Mr. Speaker. If these leaders of opposition are to be held liable, what happens to them? The people of Kenya who have suffered losses from the recent maandamanos, Mr. Speaker, they must rise, they must file those complaints with police, and the leaders must be held liable. Mr. Speaker, we were told the other day that public property, which therefore me and everybody else owns, was vandalized, Mr. Speaker, as a direct result of the maandamano. Who pays for this, Mr. Speaker? Is it right that at the end of it, the public again, including myself, Mr. Speaker, we are forced to pay that 700 million that the minister spoke about? Mr. Speaker, this cannot be right. So I pray that the team that is going to take the implementation of this, take it very seriously, because it has huge implication for the justice system on this country. I support, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Senator Kisang.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to support the petition by the health workers, the supply chain assistants. Honorable Speaker, as workers who work at the health department at the counties, Honorable Speaker, when those who are medical officers get compensated for special allowances, even those who have not done any medical courses, Honorable Speaker, should be compensated because they do the same work, they support. From what they have said, Honorable Speaker, you know the health workers work in shifts, say 3 shifts in a day. And these particular supply chain assistants who support the health workers also work in shifts. They work difficult hours of the night. So I believe when the committee, it's Labor Committee and Health Committee, take up this matter, they also need to call SRC so that when SRC is coming up with allowances for health workers, also the supply chain assistants need to be compensated. There's like clinical officers, nurses, health records, and morticians, Honorable Speaker. So it's so that they get motivated. Otherwise, you know, they would want to work maybe 8 to 5 in other departments instead of working at the Department of Health, and they don't get remunerated like the others, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, on the report by the Chair Chailak, you know, when we got independence in 1963, Honorable Speaker, we expected all our communities to enjoy rights like everybody else. We know Okek have suffered. We have Sangweres and Cherangany in Elgeyo-Marakwet County and across the country. This particular Torobei community, he said OKEX were compensated. They went up to even, I think, East African court, and they got compensated. But the Torobek community have not been compensated because these are people who used to settle, and they still settle in forest. They were in Mau Forest, Londiane Forest. But it looks like the government has forgotten them. The colonials evicted them. The first government of 63, up to now the fifth government, has not taken care of them. So this is very important that the National Land Commission, as it's been reported that there is an active investigation. The Ministry of Interior, they need to give them a code so that they can be recognized as one of the sub or tribes in Kenya, so that when they get IDs, they're identified. When jobs are being given to marginalized communities, we need to identify them as marginalized. Otherwise, they can be lumped amongst the bigger tribes, and then they might not even have anybody maybe who is employed in that community. I don't know if the chair identified. There's none. He has said there's none. So it's unfair, it's unfortunate. So I believe this report, Chair Chailak and your team, please push for the implementation so that this particular group of Kenyans benefit because they need to enjoy the rights. Honorable Speaker, I beg to support.
Senator Okenyuri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to support the report by Senator Sigei, especially on the issue of compensation. Any other Kenyan who comes to this house seeking for redress because the other mechanisms have failed deserve our complete support. Mr. Speaker, this actually brings me to a statement I read recently regarding recognition of some of the freedom fighters who contributed immensely to the acquisition of independence in this country. Mr. Speaker, I was actually very shocked to read the other day from a journalist, Larry Mado, indicating that a Kisii freedom fighter by the name of Tenyo, when his head was cut off, it was actually taken to a London museum. Such issues are not light issues. Why should be tourists visiting London to see such a head of someone who was slaughtered while fighting for our independence in this country? Instead, they should be honored in a great manner and their names be held highly in the counties of origin where they were coming from, and as a country, we recognize them. Mr. Speaker, it's not just Otenyo. I also mentioned the lady One Morangiti, who is among the most fierce ladies who actually inspired fighters at that time. She should be recognized to join our contemporaries like Mekatilili Wamenza. I know we have the issue of Koitalel, Arab Samoei, we have Akina Dedan Kimathi, and so many others. So when petitions come to this house, I will always support them, and descendants of these people who've been left behind deserve the compensation and recognitions from our government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Oroba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the report that has been tabled on the Victim Protection Board. Mr. Speaker, I think just as a matter of statistics, the Victim Protection Board has been there for over 10 years. And based on information that is there, it has actually been budgeted for over 10 years. But because this particular Victim Protection Board is actually not autonomous, it depends on the goodwill of the AG's office, also sometimes the goodwill of the political goodwill of whoever is in office. Then the operationalization of the same has actually been stagnated. Mr. Speaker, while we were looking at cases on gender-based violence and on issues such as child trafficking, sometimes you are in court for such a long period of time that the victims are actually supposed to find a safe space and to be able to see the whole process go through. But, Mr. Speaker, because the Victim Protection Board is not operationalized, because it's not an independent organization, semi-autonomous, because it still relies on certain offices, they were unable to deal with the victims and to be able to give the support that is required. Mr. Speaker, on the ongoing demonstrations, nobody talks about the women. Nobody talks about the girls that are out there. Every other time that we have demonstrations in the name of maandamano, we have serious gender-based violence happening right now. We have women and girls being raped in the guise of demonstrations. And, Mr. Speaker, in the past, the Victim Protection Board has actually tried to intervene in some of these scenarios. But because of the lack of the autonomy, because most of the time the budget was also being influenced by certain offices, we were unable to deal with this. Mr. Speaker, while we are talking about compensation of those who have lost during demonstrations, mostly people are thinking about the businessmen and women who have lost their property, who have lost their businesses, but nobody wants to talk about the gender-based violence that is ongoing. How do you compensate a victim of rape, Mr. Speaker? These are some of the things that when we are looking at operationalizing this Victim Protection Board, there has to be some framework on how to deal with these matters, Mr. Speaker. I beg to support the report, and I do hope that the jailer committee, as being led by Senator Sige, will actually fasten this process, because we need the board to be operationalized, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Senator Veronica.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for the opportunity to contribute to this very important issue, and to thank the chair, our chair in JLAC, Senator Sige, for bringing forth the two reports with respect to the petition by Paulo Mutembei and 19 others concerning the historical injustices suffered by the Torobek community, and the report on the petition by Nayan Savla concerning the delay in developing and launching a victim's right charter as provided for under the victim. Mr. Speaker, though I must quickly note that I'm a member of this committee, let me commend my colleagues in JLAC committee for being very hardworking and diligent in hearing the petitions, Mr. Speaker, and coming forth with solutions and reports on how some of these issues, Mr. Speaker, especially issues that touch on historical injustices, can be handled by the institution of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. This is an affirmation of democracy in our nation, Mr. Speaker, and an affirmation, Mr. Speaker, that constitutionalism can work towards alleviating any grievances that any community may have within our republic, Mr. Speaker. The fact that this community, Mr. Speaker, had the confidence to approach the Senate, it shows how important the institution of Senate is in terms of its oversight role in the country, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, though this is a humble community, it should give a lesson, Mr. Speaker, to our opponents who are in the minority side, Mr. Speaker, that a community which is humble and may not have achieved the qualifications that we may find on the minority side in this House, Mr. Speaker, have been wise enough to approach institutions that can give solutions to the issues that have ailed them for many years, and still trust that Kenya has institutions that can resolve those crises, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, this community has sensed discrimination, and when we met this community as JLAC in Molo, it was sad to note that even the relief food, when it is distributed, Mr. Speaker, they are not recognized, and neither are they given the relief food, because maybe the administration does not see them as a community that is recognized within the communities that need to be supported in Kenya. So, Mr. Speaker, I would say that we would urge the Attorney General to do everything possible to ensure that the recommendations that have been given by this report, Mr. Speaker, and do not become paper value, Mr. Speaker, but that, Mr. Speaker, these solutions are given back to the community and the recommendations are enforced, Mr. Speaker. I have also looked at the report by JLAC, Mr. Speaker, about the Victims' Rights Charter, Mr. Speaker. One of the ways we are going to help our nation, Mr. Speaker, is by making sure that the Victim Protection Fund, the trust fund that is supposed to be put in place, is in place, Mr. Speaker, so that People who suffer in certain instances because of injustices and violations can be adequately compensated, Mr. Speaker. And finally, even the oppressors, Mr. Speaker, can now take responsibility for anything that they get to do against the people of Kenya that amount to violations of any victim who suffers, Mr. Speaker, for instance, in the maandamano which are happening today, Mr. Speaker. It's a high time that individuals began to take responsibility for the decisions and the actions that they met out against the public and the kind of suffering they cause other people to suffer because of decisions that they make to pursue their own political interests, Mr. Speaker. So I rise to support these two reports and to further commend Jailer Committee and to commend the chair of Jailer Committee for being diligent in the task of executing its mandate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senator Mofaya.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to these three petitions, which has been brought by my very good friend, Chair Jelak. I will start with petition number 1 on discrimination of procurement officers, the chain management officers in the Ministry of Health. Honorable Speaker, it's very unfair. It's very unfair, Honorable Speaker, for people working in the same environment, same office, doing quite a number of written duties, to have this kind of segregation. Honorable Speaker, I think it's the high time that I don't know who formulates these policies, because the SRC has been too much on quite a number of issues. I don't know why they end to overlook this kind of discrimination. Because, Honorable Speaker, we can't have a section of the civil servants who are earning some emoluments, others are being sidelined. And it's the high time that we are supposed now to pronounce ourselves through the relevant committee, whether the Committee on Labor, the Committee on Health, to make sure that this matter is brought to the very best conclusion. On the issue to do with the Bill of Rights, Honorable Speaker, we have seen quite a number of times this country being held into ransom. People wake up one day without any due regard to any law. They take law into their own hands. They destroy property. Women are raped. Children are being killed all over, even people. And we have not had any opportunity to have any particular responsibility for that matter. I think it's the right time, Honorable Speaker, that this House, we are supposed to pronounce ourselves very strongly on this matter, because we cannot have a system where some hooligans in the name of demonstrations, because demonstrations, Honorable Speaker, are enshrined in the Constitution, but what we are seeing currently are those are not demonstrations. That is thuggery, that is hooliganism, and they should be countered with the strongest terms possible. On the bill of the compensation of people who have been neglected for quite a lot of time, it is shameful, Honorable Speaker, that 60 years down the line, since independence, we are still talking about compensation. And I think it is the best time now that we have a very sober government. We are going to make sure that we have quite a number of issues that cuts across the country, not necessarily what Honorable Sigay just brought. We have very many other institutions, we have many individuals who fought for this country, very many tribes, very many individuals, and I think it's the right time that, Honorable Speaker, we make sure that we have handled these things conclusively, so that we don't have to have a repeat of these things being brought to this House now and then. I support Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Senators, pursuant to Standing Order 238-1, the petition by the Supply Chain Management Assistants is hereby committed to the Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare. And in terms of Standing Order 238-2, the committee is required in not more than 60 calendar days from the time of reading this prayer to respond to the petitioners by way of a report addressed to the petitioners and laid on the table of the Senate. Next order, Clerk.
Order number 5, papers.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the Senate today, 20th July 2023. 1, the report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of the Nyeri Water and Sanitation Company Limited for the year ended 30th June 2022. 2, the report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of Mumias municipality for 22 months period ending 30th June 2022. 3, the report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of the Thika municipality for the year ended 30th June 2022. I beg to lay.
Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements.
Statements pursuant to Standing Order 53-1, the Honorable Senator Hamida Kibwana. She had 2 statements. Those statements are dropped. The Honorable Esther Okenyuri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Request for a statement on boundary delimitation between Kenya and Uganda in Lake Victoria. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations on boundary delimitation of the area surrounding Migingo Island in Lake Victoria. In the statement, the committee should, 1, provide a report on the boundary delimitation of the area surrounding Migingo Island, clarifying the coordinates of the territory of Kenya in Lake Victoria. 2, state the number of Kenyan fishermen whose economic livelihoods have been jeopardized by the Ugandan authorities in Lake Victoria through confiscation of the fishing gear and illegal arrests, indicating the total number of fishermen killed in the last 10 years on claims of illegal fishing in Ugandan waters. 3, state interventions made by both Kenya and Uganda so far to address the long-running boundary dispute between Kenya and Uganda in Lake Victoria and the outcome of the same. And finally, outline targeted interventions, if any, towards the effective and lasting resolution of the boundary dispute that has led to deaths of many Kenyans, including 2 fishermen who were killed by the Ugandan police in the first week of July 2023. Senator Okenyuri Esther MP. Thank you.
Senator Chiranke.
Mr. Speaker, I was requesting that that statement is deferred up to Tuesday, 2:30, kindly. Thank you.
Senator Karen Nyamu.
Request for statement on the status of access to government procurement opportunities under the AGPO program. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to the Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee of Finance and Budget regarding the access to government procurement opportunities AGPO, under the AGPO program, which requires that at least 30% of government procurement be reserved for enterprises owned by the youth, women, and persons living with disabilities in compliance with Article 227, Section 2, subsection B of the Constitution. In the statement, the committee should state the number of youth, women, and persons living with disabilities currently registered on the AGPO program, providing details of the number of AGPO-registered enterprises that have successfully tendered for government-related contracts. 2, outline the measures, if any, put in place by the government to protect the youth, women, and persons living with disabilities from unscrupulous businessmen who use them to illegally access opportunities meant for affirmative action without any benefit to the special group as the intended or target population. 3, explain the plans that the government, if any, to sensitize members of the public, especially the youth, women, and persons living with disability on the existence and the benefits available to them under the AGPO program. And finally, apprise the Senate on the status of compliance by the 47 counties and national government with the provision of the law with regard to the 30% and policy in line with Section 7, Article 7, subsection 2J and 33, subsection 2F of the Public Procurement Asset Disposal Act 2015. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Statement pursuant to Standing Order 57-1. The Senate Majority Leader. Yes, what is your intervention, Senator Chirange?
Mr. Speaker, I was requesting as per Standing Order number 1, if you could allow us to say something on the two statements, because they are critical. Maybe your indulgence. Can I go first?
I don't think your request is properly made. It has not. Standing
Order number 1.
Number 1
yes.
only applies where it is not expressly stated in any standing order. Now, if you read Standing Order 53,
yes.
1, where these statements are made, it provides that the Speaker may allow interventions for 15 minutes per statement, which provision I have declined to allow today so that we cover more ground on the bills and the motions. Very well, Senator Chirange. I will allow then two interventions, that is Senator Chirange and Senator Kenywa. I can see more trying to queue. Senator Kenywa and Senator Mundigi. Those three. Then we move to the statement pursuant to Standing Order 57.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for that indulgence. Mr. Speaker, sir, I just wanted to comment on the two statements by Senator Esther Okenyuri about the border issues. I think we have had a bill in this House about the county boundaries bill. I don't know how far it is, Mr. Speaker. I think it will assist in resolving some of those. Mr. Speaker, we need also as a government, I know Kenyan government and Ugandan government enjoy a cordial working relationship. I think the Diplomatic Corps and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Diaspora, Mr. Speaker, and the Ministry of Lands can lead, because we don't want to lose any part of this country, Mr. Speaker, even an inch, because we must protect the territories of this. The famous one, Mr. Speaker, is the Mingingo Island, where there was allegation that the Ugandan police, Mr. Speaker, was coming in and out and taking taxes. I think that those are things we can do diplomatically, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of AGPO, I agree with Senator Karen Nyamu that most of the young people, Mr. Speaker, don't have startup capital, they don't have money, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, you find individuals who are 75 years old running AGPO and using young people as the face, Mr. Speaker, and that is why it always becomes a challenge to do an empowerment, Mr. Speaker. The biggest culprits are the county governments, Mr. Speaker, because they are giving tenders to entrepreneurs, to people who are beyond 35 years, Mr. Speaker, and you have our young people are relegated only to being hired, Mr. Speaker, in political rallies and other issues that do not assist them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would have expected Senator Karen Nyamu to include in that statement to
Senator Kenywa.
Asante Bwana Spika. Nataka kushukuru taarifa iliyoletwa na Senator Karen Nyamu, Bwana Spika, kwa sababu Bwana Spika imesemwa vizuri sana katika katiba yetu, Bwana Spika. Vijana, akina mama pamoja na wale walio walemavu wapewe fursa, Bwana Spika, ya kufanya biashara na serikali zetu. Bwana Spika, ukiangalia katika gatuzi zetu ndio wengine wanapewa fursa ya kufanya biashara, lakini hata kile cha manufaa zaidi, Bwana Spika, sio kupewa tu fursa ya kufanya biashara. Wanapewa zile fursa ya kufanya biashara, lakini Bwana Spika, unapata hawalipwi, Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo unapata wanaishi, badala ya kusaidika, ile pesa kidogo aliyokuwa nayo ameongeza, anaenda katika banki, anachukua loan Bwana Spika, lakini unapata halipwi na hizi gatuzi zetu Bwana Spika. Na si gatuzi zetu peke yake Bwana Spika, hata serikali kuu Bwana Spika hailipi. Kwa hivyo katika taarifa hiyo wale watakaoshughulikia Bwana Spika waangazie zaidi hata baada ya hawa vijana walemavu na kina mama kupatiwa fursa ya kufanya biashara Bwana Spika, wanalipwa kwa sababu cha manufaa zaidi Bwana Spika, si kufanya biashara peke yake, ni waweze kulipwa, ndio waweze angalau waweze kupata afueni katika hali ya maisha. Nashukuru Bwana Spika.
Senator Mundigi.
Asante Bwana Spika, naunga mkono Asante Bwana Spika, naunga mkono mambo ya agipo yaangaliwe vizuri kwa sababu kwa miaka mingi vijana, wasichana na wasiojiweza wamekuwa kinyanyaswa kwa sababu matajiri wengi wamekuwa wakiandikisha kampuni na pia wanaenda wanaangalia kampuni zingine wanaandika kama ndio vijana na wasichana. Kwa hiyo naomba kama kutafanywa upelelezi kuonekane kama wale makontrakta wakubwa kama itawezekana kuwe vijana wetu na wasichana watakuwa napata kazi na pia wale wanjiwezi. Kwa sababu imekuwa pia mangavana na serikali wamekuwa hao watu ndio wanafaidika, lakini wameenda wakapandirisha ikawa ndio sasa wale wandogo. Hiyo ingine nimekuwa mimi kuna wakati kufanya hiyo kazi ya contractor, lakini inakuwa kama watoto wetu wakiandikisha wakitoka shule wanakuwa kulipwa ni shinda, na ni kitu inafaa iangaliwe governors na national government kama wanataka kusaidia vijana wetu kwa mwezi mmoja wao wakilipwa ndio waweze kufanya kazi ile inafaa. Asante Bwana Speaker.
Senator Karungo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support both the statements sought by the good senators. On the issue of Migingo Island, Mr. Speaker, this is something that I've had for quite a long time. These people of Migingo, they've been suffering, Mr. Speaker. And actually I was just thinking, if there is any place that needs maandamano right now in this area to fight for their right, Mr. Speaker. Because they have been, for quite a long duration, Mr. Speaker, been harassed by the police from the neighboring country. Mr. Speaker, no one seems to be talking about this, even the leaders from that area, Mr. Speaker. We had a very nice opportunity to solve this issue, and this was during the handshake government, Mr. Speaker, when both the president then and the opposition leader were in good terms, Mr. Speaker. They could have solved this issue of Migingo so that these Kenyans can wake up every morning, go about their businesses without being afraid that somebody is going to harass them, kill them, detain them illegally, or even bar them from their daily activities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this island is where fishermen, Mr. Speaker, land when they are doing their businesses. So I urge the department or the committee that is going to be tasked to deal with this issue to dig deeper and see why these people have been let to suffer like that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the other statement, I think it has escaped my mind what it was about, but on the issue of AGPO, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mandago.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, probably I'll pick it up from where the Senator for Kiambu wanted to deal with AGPO. Mr. Speaker, there has been a deliberate effort in this country, and we want to laud the government of Kenya and county governments and agencies, and particularly Parliament, Mr. Speaker, for passing the law to allow youth, women, and persons with disability to participate in government business, Mr. Speaker. However, Mr. Speaker, young people, PWDs and women, because of the nature of lack of capital, lack of resources to do this business, and the need to do the business, Mr. Speaker, this category have ceded the privilege and preservation of that procurement by incorporating other members as their partners in business, and therefore losing the benefits that would have been accruing to them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think it is time, as a House, Mr. Speaker, we think of amending that section of the procurement so that part of the requirements for evaluation, like bank statement, like experience, and many others, can be removed, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you go to the technology world, you don't need any experience. An innovation by a young programmer today can provide a system worth billions of Kenya shillings without necessarily requiring experience. Mr. Speaker, I beg to support that statement and ask that the committee that will look into it should also look into the possibility of amending the Act so that all these other unnecessary requirements are removed so that youth companies, women companies, PWD companies remain for PWDs, youth and women. Mr. Speaker, on the matter of Migingo and the security and the boundaries of Kenya and our neighbors, Mr. Speaker, the committee must take the matter very seriously.
Honourable Senators, we've expanded the 15 minutes allowable under Standing Order 53.3. We'll therefore move to the statements pursuant to Standing Order 57.1, the Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to Standing Order 57.1, I hereby present the business of the Senate for the week commencing Tuesday, 25th July 2023. Before I proceed, I wish to take this opportunity to welcome you back from the 2 weeks recess. I hope that you will be able to meet with your constituents. I hope that you were able to meet with your constituents, friends and families, and that you took time off to rest and recharge. Part 4 of the Senate's calendar commenced on Tuesday, 18th July 2023, and will run until the rise of the Senate on Thursday, 10th August 2023. Mr. Speaker, sir, this part begins with crucial business before the Senate, as the honorable senators will recall the county government's equitable share cash disbursement schedule for the financial year 2023-2024 was tabled before the Senate during the sitting of the Senate held on Tuesday, 18th July 2023, and is under consideration by the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget. Consequently, the committee will table its report on the same for the consideration and adoption of the Senate. This will be a great stride to unlock the release of funds to the county governments. I therefore urge the Standing Committee to expedite a consideration of the schedule and table the report thereon. 23 motions are pending conclusion before the Senate, while the 14 petitions are due for reporting by respective committees. I take this opportunity to recommend the chairpersons who have tabled the reports on the respective petitions committed to the committees and urge the remaining standing committees to do the same. Additionally, 170 statements are pending conclusion by the standing committees. I urge the responsible committees to expeditiously consider the petitions and statements before them and table reports pursuant to the standing orders. Mr. Speaker, sir, at the meeting of the Senate Business Committee held on 18th July 2023, the committee approved the set of questions to appear in the order paper for Wednesday, 16th July 2023 morning sitting. The summary of the questions and the cabinet secretaries to appear on that day are as follows. Question number 18 by Senator James Lomenen, MP, to the Cabinet Secretary, Foreign Affairs and Diaspora Affairs, on the inaction of the Kenyan government to hasten the release of the Turkana pastoralists arrested in Uganda. Question number 19 by Senator George Mbugua, MP, to Cabinet Secretary Health on the accessibility of health services, health facilities and services to persons with disabilities. And question number 20 by Senator George Mbugua, MP, to Cabinet Secretary Labor and Social Protection on the compliance with the Persons with Disabilities Act with regard to the reservation of employment to PWDs. Mr. Speaker, sir, finally, on Tuesday, 25th July 2023, the Senate Business Committee will consider and approve the business of the week. The committee will also schedule any other business pursuant to the standing orders. I thank you, and I hereby lay the statement to the table of the Senate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next order.
Order number 8, the Public Finance Management Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills number 16 of 2023. First reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Public Finance Management Act and for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 9, the County Government's Additional Allocations Bill, National Assembly Bills number 23 of 2023. First reading. A bill for an act of parliament to provide for the additional allocations to county governments for the 2023-2024 financial year, the responsibilities of national government and the county governments pursuant to such allocation and for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 10, the Persons with Disabilities Bill, Senate Bills number 7 of 2023. Second reading.
At the interruption of debate, Senator Nyutu was on his feet and he had 16 minutes balance. He is not in the chair, he's not in the chamber, and therefore we will proceed to allow other senators to make their contributions. Senator Margaret Kamara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to support the bill that has been brought forward by my very dear sister, Senator Asike. Mr. Speaker, this is a very, very important bill as far as the Constitution of Kenya is concerned. The Persons with Disabilities Bill is unpacking the Article 54 of the Constitution, the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Mr. Speaker, this bill I want to support from the onset because it is a very important bill as far as our bills of rights are concerned, the rights of every Kenyan. In this bill, Mr. Speaker, the bill is looking at the rights of people with disabilities with a view to realizing the articles in the Constitution, both in the Bill of Rights and Article 54, which is touching on the persons with disabilities in particular. Mr. Speaker, we know that in our country, persons with disabilities have suffered both at the family front, in the education sector, and being supported by the government. The sad part is that at the family level, they have not been taken care of much, firstly because of the cultural beliefs that came up from time immemorial. So because of the cultural beliefs, these are people who were left on their own, sometimes left with their mothers only, at the mercy of the mothers, because a mother, Mr. Speaker, will not throw away a child. It doesn't matter how the child was born. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, is that this is a Kenyan who actually doesn't have to be taken care of by a mother. This is somebody who must be taken care of by the country. Hence, the good statements that are articulated in our Constitution. Because a disabled person has rights to be treated with dignity and respect and to be addressed properly by everybody. But it had to take the revision of the Constitution for the Bill of Rights to highlight this. And I'm very grateful that Senator Asike found it necessary to start this as her first bill since she came to the Senate. Mr. Speaker, it is very important to note that as was discussed previously, the Constitution recognized the persons with disability in terms of facilitating them to enjoy the rights of the quota in tenders in this country, supplies in this country. But we need to ask ourselves as a Senate, how much of that is being implemented? And I believe that once this bill is out, we need to come up with a system of doing stock taking. Because how many counties, as we are talking, Mr. Speaker, are actually considering people with disabilities as far as supplies are concerned and as far as tenders are concerned? These are things that we need to question as a Senate. Mr. Speaker, the other one that is even more concerning is the issue that is raised in Article 54(2) of the Constitution, that the state must ensure that there is a progressive implementation, and I say progressive may have been our downfall, because when it was written progressive implementation of the principle that at least 5% of members of the public in elective and appointed positions are people with disabilities, a lot of people have taken the excuse of progressive, and they have used progressive to look like where you have employed 100 people and the right of the persons with disabilities is 5, you are progressive if you employ 1. And people are very bold sometimes. It is very sad that people would consider that next year we'll add another one, as if it is not their right. The reason 5% was put there is because it was our hope that people with disabilities would not exceed 5% of the Constitution. It was not because of sympathy. It was the fact that we need to provide for that. And since it was provided, Mr. Speaker, it is extremely important that employment in every government department, start with government. Because if government does not implement the Constitution, who else will? We cannot talk of the private sector before we talk of government. So when we talk of 5%, Mr. Speaker, this progressive word should be removed so that we are able to implement and actually get the people that we have. Mr. Speaker, education has been a very big challenge for persons with disability. First, access issues. Access issues, how to access even a classroom in a primary school for one who is physically disabled. You find that they are not enabled to even access the classroom itself. So we still have schools, although there was an amendment in the Education Act that all schools must have ramps, must have allow accessibility. We still have schools that have only accessed 1 or 2 classrooms, and you can't access everything else. You cannot expect people with disabilities to remain in 2 classrooms. They must progress with the other children. And this must be something that the development of a building or our buildings should not be approved if they don't enable everybody to access. Mr. Speaker, the rights are therefore, of people with disabilities are therefore affected in several levels. They are accepted, they are hampered as far as education is concerned, so they don't attend the education at the right time. We know that disability takes you back a few steps, but we must facilitate to ensure that everybody, according to the Constitution, is taken care of. That equality is ensured, and I thank our sister for emphasizing this in the bill, that equality is a right, and that we need to address our people, all Kenyans equally. All Kenyans, whatever the disabilities. And some of the things that happen in education, again, as I keep referring to education, is extremely surprising because you have children that need Braille. But how many teachers in the primary school training have been trained on how to use Braille? Because if we really want to help these children, there is nothing wrong with a child who wants to use Braille. There's nothing else. They're very healthy otherwise. It is just that they can't see it and they need Braille. Do we have to have exclusive schools with Braille when they can hear, when they can talk, and when they can actually translate? Mr. Speaker, recently we went to schools, special schools in Uasin Gishu as the Committee of Education. And we went to a school that is a special school that hosts children with albinism. A school I'm very proud to have been associated from inception because of the outcry that people were looking for organs of children with disabilities just out of ignorance, out of cultural ignorance or whatever it is. And when we went to this school with the Committee of Education, we were very surprised to find a teacher who is a VIP, like our sister would say, the visually impaired person, teaching children in a normal classroom. We sat there. If Senator Nyoto was here, I'm sure he was going to mention even that, he will be mentioning that in his own speech, because he was in shock. We had gone in looking for, waiting, because we had 5 minutes, but we sat there for 20 minutes to see how this teacher was teaching these students. He was teaching students in a normal classroom. Surprisingly, he was even able to write on the blackboard because he was teaching mathematics, and he was writing things on the blackboard in a straight line without any interference. Practice makes perfect, and I believe God gives these people an extra sense. What we are very happy about in that school is that because they were posted a teacher who was VIP, they decided to bring Braille, and believe me or not, the other children are requesting to learn Braille, just for fun. And this is where we should be going. Mr. Speaker, the international law requires now that actually people with disabilities should be integrated as much as possible. We are going to bring another bill here later on sign language, and I interested my sister Crystal to be part of that bill because it's a very dear one to me. I also have been participating in a school for the deaf in Uasin Gishu, and that was another school we visited with the Committee of Education. With the sign language bill, we are also saying these children should be integrated, because except for the fact that they are not hearing, they can actually do anything with anybody, they can go sports with anybody, but they need to sign, because that's the language. And for that reason, we told ourselves, we are going to be proposing to this Senate, Mr. Speaker, that sign language should be one of our languages. According to the Constitution, it is one of the languages anyway, because we have English, we have Kiswahili, and we have sign language. So we said, why should all the children learn sign language? Mr. Speaker, once upon a time, I and you were in the cabinet. During that time, I went for a science and technology conference in Japan. I learned something that was amazing, that in Japan, they believe a child can learn anything between 5 and 7. And between 5 and 7, they pump anything that they want the child to learn. If our children are taught sign language when they're in primary school, class 1, class 2, class 3, Mr. Speaker, all our children in this country will sign. And this is very important for integration purposes. It is very important so that when we say we want to integrate the children, then anybody can sign. I'm going to come back to the trainer. But sign language for every child is a very, very important step and a very progressive step as far as our education is concerned. It is going to be very progressive because now that we are going to CBC, we want a lot of things to be practical. So, Mr. Speaker, we need to make sure that everybody can sign. And, Mr. Speaker, when we had public participation on the other bill, the sign language bill, I was amazed by a mother who, after discovering that the child was deaf, they actually decided that the whole house was going to be trained on signing. And she came to public participation, to us during public participation and said, please teach the parents how to sign. Because a child goes to school, learns sign language, comes home, and there is a creation of another language in the house. Because the mothers don't know how to communicate, the parents don't know how to communicate, and they've been communicating to their children the way they wish. So they say there is a whole confusion, and she said the child was trying to train us on how to sign, and we were at a loss because we did not know what she was telling us. She changed the sign from the rudimentary way of communicating with the parents to what the teacher said. Go home and sign for your parents so that you are able to, so that they learn. But better still, we should have a program that parents with children with those kind of challenges are trained. It is very important that if this is going to be a language, that we actually can communicate with these children from when they are young. I am emphasizing this one, Mr. Speaker, because it is then that they can acquire their own education, that they can grow like all other Kenyans, and that we can talk of the equality, the other equalities that this bill is talking about. So equality has to start from the beginning. We have to provide equal opportunities for them from the very beginning so that they actually change. Mr. Speaker, the other equality that we saw when we visited, we went also to the school for the mentally challenged, and we realized that there are children who have come to the institution when they didn't know a lot of things. And Mr. Speaker, what happens? Within 1 year, they started talking. Within 1 year, they started moving around. And over time, they have changed, and those disabilities fade. Mr. Speaker, the way we say if you use your right hand will work, is the way we must address this issue of disability. Because there are people who have very mild disabilities, but we come and but because they are not being helped, they don't fade, but they would fade. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the trainers, the teachers, our primary school teachers, our ECD teachers must be trained accordingly to take care of the young people with disabilities. We must have teachers trained in Braille. When they are in teachers training school, institutions, they must learn Braille, they must learn everything, because integration is something that we will never avoid. If a parent has a child in Mandera where there is no other school, that child must go to school. So it would be nice if the teachers know how to sign, they know how to do Braille, so that they can take care of those children. Mr. Speaker, apart from the training, we need to start providing for those children. As we are all aware, a parent with a child who is disabled, he spends 50% of the time with that one child, and 50% of the remaining time with the rest of the family. Those parents and caregivers must be taken care of. Mr. Speaker, I am hoping that this bill will also talk about the care, we'll be able to put emphasis as we go through, we'll put emphasis on caregivers, because those are very special Kenyans, people who must be supported. We know that there is money that is being given to a disabled child, and we need to be careful also that that support is reaching the child. And also, apart from giving the child, we need care, we need support for the caregiver so that it is separate. Otherwise, the caregivers will take care of, or even if their parents will use the 2,000 shillings that belong to the child to take care of themselves and the other children and forget these children. So we need to cut, and we have to have systems that will ensure that people with disabilities, especially from when they are born, are taken care of. That way, we will be able to reduce the negative impact on the family as far as costs of health are concerned and everything. Free health, free education must be ensured. In this bill, I believe we are talking of free education for those who are under education, and we discussed it in the other bill, the learners with disability, that we want free education from early childhood all the way to the university. These are people who must be taken care of by the government, not by their parents. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I really support the bill and congratulate Senator Crystal Asike for giving us a wonderful write-up in this bill. Thank you.
Senator Omtata.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you for the opportunity you have given me to address this House on this very important bill. To begin with, Mr. Speaker, sir, I congratulate Senator Crystal Asige for having the presence of mind to bring about this bill, which seeks to repeal the existing act, which was enacted before the Constitution of Kenya 2010 was enacted, and which then does not accord and on all fours with the Constitution. So this bill is an opportunity to bring to life the various very, very progressive provisions of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 in terms of the human rights of people with disabilities. And first of all, I'm happy they retain the word people with disability, because there has been an attempt to distort this issue by having a change in name to begin referring to them as people living with disabilities. No. A person living with a disability is what I had the other day when I sprained my leg, and I was put in a cast. I was temporarily disabled, therefore I was living with a disability. But if you have got a permanent disability, you are not living with disability, you are a disabled person. So, the person with disability, that disability is what then brings in the challenges that these people face. And given the facts of our country as a third world country, which is basically a poor country, you'll find that people with the disability, people who suffer certain physical disabilities, tend to be the poorest of the poor in the society. And that calls for a sort of, for lack of a better word, what I would refer to as a Marshall Plan, an affirmative action program focused on people with various types of disability, so that they become the responsibility of the state, over and above being the responsibility of their parents and communities, so that they should have incentives, or the state should step forward to accommodate them and to provide them with some cushioning that will allow them to function in a normal way. Other people who do not have those challenges are able to function. And I think Senator Crystal is a perfect example of a person who has been able to overcome the physical challenge that she faces to be able to operate at par with all of us. And if there was any doubt that a person with challenges, physical challenges can perform, you just need not go further than looking at Crystal. She's always elegantly dressed. She's always punctual. She's very articulate in her presentation. But she was able to achieve that maybe because her parents had the means and the capacity to make her be what she was meant to be. But imagine if Crystal had been born in a family that was materially challenged. Maybe she would be sitting with a begging bowl at the corner of some street. And so it's upon the state as a duty bearer for human rights to come up with affirmative action plans that secure people who have these challenges. And I think when the bill goes further, I would like to see that come out clearly and emphatically. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, sir, I've looked at Section 8 of the bill, and I'm happy that it upholds traditional family values. It maintains the right to marry a person of opposite sex and form a family based on free consent. And other rights that are coming on. You see, in the modern world where there are a lot of distortions, I'm happy that Senator Asige has had the presence of mind to pronounce in no uncertain terms the binary nature of the human sexuality. And I congratulate her for that, because there's a lot of pressure to distort these things. Another thing I would like to see come out in the bill, which I have not seen, is that people with disability, through use of certain names, are othernized, dehumanized, and ostracized. And Swahili has got some of the worst names for people with disability. I would love to see in this bill an attempt to sort of make those words politically incorrect, and maybe new nomenclature to emerge that defines, that respects, first of all, the humanity of the person. It's very, very painful for somebody, a human being, just because of a physical challenge, to be referred in a manner that dehumanizes and objectifies the person. So I would like to see, when this bill goes to further as it's being reviewed, to see if it can really come up and address the question of use of names that dehumanize, otherize, and ostracize persons living with certain disabilities. I would also love to see sanctions, severe sanctions against people who, because they don't have any challenges, would abuse people with disabilities, would deny people with disability their rights. So I've seen the rights are well pronounced of these people, but I would like to see the sanctions enhanced where these rights are violated, so that there's a deterrence, something that will deter the do-no-gooders of this world from going on expeditions of frustrating people with disability or of denying them their rights. So this particular bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, comes at an opportune time when we have narratives in this country that are geared towards emancipating our people, be it from economic bondage or any other bondage. So within the same narrative, which I hear in government circles, I hear in opposition circles, I hear in civil society of emancipation, this bill is really a good installment in that debate that here are a group of Kenyans, citizens or residents of this country, who require and deserve special attention. And that attention can only be presented using the wherewithal that only the state can marshal. Left to private families, parents, communities, these people will drop through the cracks, and maybe those who are enabled and as gifted as Crystal will fall through the cracks and will never be noticed. So I think it's upon the state to go the extra mile and say that where nature has visited a disability on a citizen of Kenya or a resident of Kenya, the state will step in to make sure that the challenge is mitigated through certain measures. So I really congratulate Senator Sige for this very, very brilliant bill, and I look forward to seeing it enacted into a law that will move us forward, and especially that will implement the Constitution of Kenya, which has faced a lot of challenges in its implementation, sometimes because of negligence of those who are supposed to implement, sometimes because of the incompetence of those who are supposed to implement, and sometimes because of outright sabotage by those who are supposed to implement the Constitution. Our Constitution is a very, very good document. It covers very many sectors, and it's by coming up to implement chapter by chapter, inch by inch, that we shall be able to have this Constitution be the foundation of our national creed, that justice be our shield and defender. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, this bill is well deserved, this bill is well written, this bill is timely, and this bill is a necessary installment in the laws of Kenya. And I'll pray that it will be able to pass and become an act of parliament, but with the various amendments here and there to tighten it, to ensure that it's comprehensive, to ensure that it leaves nobody behind, to ensure that the state is held accountable for every individual person with living with the disability, or having, not living, every person with disability. I'm sorry, I withdraw the word living with disability, but every person with disability is taken care of, not as at a statistical number, but as an individual. Because sometimes we might go into statistics, and by being into statistics, we might begin using percentages and say that this percentage of people with disability has been catered for. That to me will not be acceptable. The bill must ensure that each individual person with disability is taken care of and nobody falls through the cracks. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, sir, I support the bill, and I thank you most profusely for the opportunity to address this august House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Senator Wakoli Wafula. Now, honorable senators, there being no other senators wishing to contribute to this debate, I will call upon the mover to reply. Senator Crystal Asig.
Just opening my note, Speaker.
And Senator, you have half an hour to reply.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the House, those who have been able to support my bill, for doing so. Mr. Speaker, the Persons with Disabilities Act of 2003 was expedited and assented to as a result of the personal experience of His Excellency Mwai Kibaki back in the early 2000s, only after he acquired his own disability. Mr. Speaker, it's public knowledge that once President Kibaki was able to understand what it feels like to have a disability, was able to experience it, was able to live and breathe the limitations of having a disability, is when this bill was when these issues were taken into account and prioritized at the time and became law in 2003. We pray that the adoption of this bill is not ever again dependent of somebody else in the executive, Mr. Speaker, but rather expedited, because a significant proportion of our country needs these provisions that are outlined in this bill. It's meant to serve all Kenyans and address the needs of individuals with disabilities across this nation. Mr. Speaker, I had a conversation with a few people since moving this bill on Tuesday, and found some recent statistics, recent numbers that I'd like to share. When a person with disability is, for example, in school, as has been spoken about by Senator Kamar here, it costs around 150 to 200,000 shillings to get a braille review, for example. It costs about 2,000 or 3,000 shillings in comparison. However, we all need to use the washroom. Mr. Speaker, when a person needs to buy a new pair of shoes so that they can be mobile, it will cost anything from as low as 100 shillings to get a pair of shoes. But for a wheelchair user who also needs to be mobile, it will cost him or her over 30,000 shillings. But we all need to be mobile and be able to move around as we wish independently. Mr. Speaker, paper for you and I in this house that we use will cost maybe around 2 to 5 shillings to print a piece of paper.
Honorable Senator, I'm now on the chair.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
As I was saying, Speaker, to print a piece of paper, it costs around 2 to 5 shillings. However, for a braille reader, again, to get braille paper costs around 2,000 shillings. But all of us need to read and write. Madam Speaker, I talked about innovations in this house that have been put into the market because of solutions for persons with disabilities. One of those innovations is the keyboard. The keyboard was created as a solution for visually impaired persons to be able to write and go about their learning. And there are many other innovations like this that have come as a solution to the problem that persons with disabilities face. Madam Speaker, this bill also offers solutions to persons with disabilities in this country, because unfortunately the 2003 Act is not in line with the Constitution as it is today, as we adhere to today. Madam Speaker, like I say, it shouldn't ever have to be incumbent on somebody experiencing a disability to understand that it's important for provisions to be made and laws to be, frameworks to be put in place to support persons with disabilities in this country. And that's all that this bill is trying to do. Technologies have moved forward since 2003. Designs have moved forward since 2003. Universal access has moved mountains, leaps and bounds since 2003. But unfortunately, that provision, that act does not mirror what we as persons with disabilities need today. And Madam Speaker, as this bill hopefully moves past its second reading and through its third and over to the National Assembly, it will continue to be known and appreciated that persons with disabilities right now do not have any legal framework that is in line with the Constitution for them to fall back on. So right now, we have no security as it stands. And Madam Speaker, all that this bill requests to do is to give persons with disabilities security in the country that we live in, that we call home. Because it shouldn't access and freedoms and rights should not only be provided for non-disabled persons, but also for persons with disabilities in the country. Madam Speaker, again, I thank the senators who have been kind enough to support the bill, those who as well, when I was drafting it, gave their ideas and contributions and will continue to do so. And Madam Speaker, I now beg to reply. Madam Speaker, kindly, I request your indulgence pursuant to Standing Order 66.3 to defer the vote of this bill. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Senator. We will defer the division due to numbers and the putting of the question, so that will happen next week, Tuesday at 2:30. We will also reorganize the order paper, and Mr. Clerk, you may call the next order. Order number 15. Call order number 15, please.
Order number 15, the Konza Technopolis Bill, Senate Bills number 2 of 2023, second reading.
Honorable Senator Gloria.
Madam Speaker, I rise to propose that the Konza Technopolis Bill, the Konza Technopolis Bill 2023 be read a second time. Madam Speaker, as we are all probably aware that the Konza Technopolis actually operates right now, it exists based on a flagship project under a gazette notice and a regulation that has actually expired. What I'm trying to say is that this bill stands to give a legal framework for Konza Technopolis and to address certain issues that have actually made, given Konza the slow movement in terms of investors, in terms of picking up in terms of Technopolis. Madam Speaker, the Konza Technopolis Bill pushes to establish the Konza Technopolis and Konza Authority. This is a legal framework that is going to guide the operations of Konza, that is going to ensure that certain things that are not in place are actually put in place based on our constitution, that will also ensure that we give investors the confidence that they need in terms of pumping in more money to Konza City. Madam Speaker, most of the investors that have expressed interest to pump in money in Konza have certain fears. One of the fears is that we have had regulations that lapse. This means that when you are putting in money, you have to consider that the return on investment is actually pegged within the time frame of the regulations. The Konza Technopolis Bill will address this by ensuring that we have a semi-autonomous authority that is going to have a legal framework that can operate as an entity, can sign contracts, can purchase land, and can be sued or sue, so that we can be able to give the investors that confidence that they are dealing with a legal entity that can be held accountable. Madam Speaker, the Konza Technopolis Bill also addresses the issue of creating the board. The board will consist of certain members. We'll have a chair who will be recruited by the PSC and appointed by the president. We'll have the PS of ICT as part of a board member, the PS of finance, the PS of industrialization. We'll have 2 members proposed by the Council of Governors. We'll have 1 member appointed by the CS of ICT, and we'll have the CEO who will be an ex officio member of the board. This board will play oversight in the operations of the Konza city, and will be able to make certain decisions and be held accountable. Madam Speaker, you will note that based on certain policies and regulations that we have in government right now, we are unable to push for more investors to come into Konza. Madam Speaker, one of the things that needs to be addressed in order for this bill to make sense is that we have most of our data that is being produced by Kenyans stored abroad, and we are trying to push for the data center industry here in Kenya. One of the things that I hope we will be able to address with our data protection bill that I have also proposed is that we have local storage of all our data in Kenya, and therefore we will have investors wanting to take up leases under Konza so they can be able to feed the market of local storage of the data. Madam Speaker, this bill that I am proposing also sets to give a framework to give incentives to investors, Madam Speaker. If you look at part 4 of the bill, we have the incentives for investment in the technopolis. The authority shall develop and publish in the Gazette the criteria for identifying persons to carry on the business of investors in the technopolis. The authority shall, in formulating the criteria under subsection 1, give the categories of industries for investment, the minimum amount of resources to be invested, the minimum number of local staff to be employed, the percentage of local content to be applied to the various categories of local goods, services, and human resources by foreign investors. Madam Speaker, what we are trying to push here is job creation under Konza. We need enough investors to come on board and say that they want to put up data centers, they want to put up BPOs, they want to put up or engage Kenyans in businesses that will create jobs. Madam Speaker, some of the investors that have wanted to come in a big way, including the Fortune 500 companies such as Facebook, which is now referred to as Meta, one of the things that they look is what kind of incentives that the government provide. What kind of incentives do they get from where they're going to set up business? And Konza Technopolis Authority, this bill actually gives a framework in terms of the incentives, and having the board and the Technopolis as a legal framework will be able to address that. We'll have investors who want to come in big time, and they'll be looking for tax exemptions. They'll be looking for incentives in terms of government innovation grants and such things. So this is also one of the things that the bill will address, because as it stands now, there is no legal framework of the same, and so the same cannot be achieved. In terms of the financial framework, the Konza Technopolis bill actually pushes to have accountability of funds that it will be drawing from the exchequer, funds that it will be collecting in terms of the revenues that the Technopolis will actually be collecting from the leaseholders and those who are operating at Konza. So again, as it stands now, there is no financial framework for the same, because as I stated, Konza exists on a flagship project of Vision 2030. It is embedded on a Gazette notice and a regulation that has expired. So this bill is very much needed to be able to legalize the operations of Konza. Madam Speaker, it goes without saying that we are now moving to the innovation era, and this Konza bill will be able to give a basis for all other upcoming technopolis cities in different areas, in different counties, so they can be able to have a legal framework to set up. Say, for instance, we are done with Machakos County, we move to Kisii County. What will be the legal framework of setting up a Konza, of setting up a technopolis? So it gives a basis in terms of further scaling up the technopolis to other counties. So, Madam Speaker, I think it goes without saying that first of all, we are very late and this bill needs to be passed, because as it stands now, Konza is actually what we would call illegal, because it does not have a legal framework. And this bill is seeking to cure that and to ensure that we are able to scale up the technopolis across all other counties. Madam Speaker, as I conclude, I would like to place emphasis on our government owning the spaces of innovation, putting up policies that will ensure that we own the revenue that we create in terms of the online businesses. Madam Speaker, I know recently that there was a tax that was imposed for online content creators. And from where I stand, and for having a background of being in the ICT world and actually managing a very big facility, the Facebook data center in Denmark, I would like to say that we are looking into the wrong areas. In terms of revenue collection by government, we need to look at how to get our taxes back to this country. How do we have the online operators coming to set up base in Kenya and being taxable entities? As it stands now, none of the big online companies, the Facebooks, the social media companies, are actually set up legally in Kenya. And some of them actually say that, you know, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the policies, we don't have the legal frameworks. And this is what Konza bill is actually trying to address. In terms of the infrastructure, we have the infrastructure at Konza. We have set up proper fiber. We've set up proper facilities where you can actually plug and play a data center. But now what is remaining is the legal framework to operate with, so that we can be able to convince the investors to come and set up in Konza bill. But most importantly, it is not about just the jobs that we will create by having these investors setting up locally. It is also the opportunities in terms of capacity building of our young people who are engaging in online businesses, in innovative businesses. We need a place where we can enhance the capacity of our youth. We need a city, we need an authority that can be able to further give opportunities to our youth, and that is what the Konza Technopolis bill is addressing, and I hope that we'll be able to see this bill to fruition. Madam Speaker, I would like to call upon Senator Kisang to second the bill.
Senator Kisang, proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to second the Konza bill by Honorable Gloria. Madam Speaker, as it's been said, you know, Konza was established as one of the flagship projects or under Vision 2030 from 2012. And Madam Speaker, this Konza operated under a legal notice that expired actually last year. So as we speak now, Konza is just running without any legal backing, and we had even requested and indicated that they need to renew that legal notice, to issue another legal notice, so that at least as we continue with the bill, at least the establishment runs properly. Madam Speaker, as the mover has said, this particular bill basically desires to establish Konza Technopolis, and this particular bill will also be replicated across either counties or economic blocks, because as Konza as it stands now, it is within 3 counties: Makwiny County, Machakos County, and Kajiado County. That is one of the reasons why we say, because these technopolises will be domiciled in counties, we need 2 board members proposed by the Council of Governors, and we will be seeking to bring amendment to ensure that between the two that will be given by the county government, one of them will be from the opposite gender, so that at least there is representation of also men and women in the board. Madam Speaker, clause 5 of the bill proposes to give the functions of this technopolis. One is to administer the planning, development, and management of the technopolis. Secondly, Honorable Speaker, is to facilitate the specialized research and development in high technology in collaboration with relevant institutions of higher learning and research. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as we speak now, there is already Kenya Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, a university that has been set up at Konza, is at advanced stage. I believe by next year, around March, the university is going to be opened. The president is likely to go there and open the university. And this is a university that specializes mainly in science and technology at graduate level, master's and PhD level. I believe also there is a proposal to do what we call online learning, basically open learning, so that you don't have to go to Konza, you don't have to go to the university to read. You do your education online. Madam Speaker, one of the other functions is to facilitate the conduct of scientific research and development in technology and innovation in Kenya in collaboration with the National Commission for Science, Technology and Innovation pursuant to Section 3 and 28 of Science, Technology and Innovation Act and the site. Madam Speaker, this is very important. You remember when there was the pandemic of COVID-19, 2020, 2021, 22, Madam Speaker, and you know, there was a proposal. It came up that we need to have our own research center, research institute that can manufacture vaccines, Madam Speaker. And Konza was one of the places that was picked to be ideal because of the size, of that particular, and also the area. Madam Speaker, in the past also, you know, the Silicon Valley in the US, it's just started like this. It's only that this Konza technopolis of ours has taken so long, since 2012. Now it is 11 years. We should be far. We should have actually taken off. We should have taken off by now, but because of maybe the bureaucracy and also lack of resources, it has not picked. But I believe with this law in place, Madam Speaker, Konza technopolis should be able to take off. Already they have moved to site, there are buildings there, they have an headquarters there, and in fact there is a proposal, Madam Speaker, that this should be a smart city, because we use a lot of resources, Madam Speaker, to go to hotels in Mombasa, we go to Naivasha, but if we had a smart city at Technopolis with conference facilities, with hotels, basically we should be going there. Even as government institutions, there is a big data center that has been set up at Konza. Our ministries basically should be having Konza as a disaster recovery center to ensure that government data is safe. As my colleague has said, basically, she's also coming up to amend the Data Protection Act to ensure, you know, government data is safe and secure. Madam Speaker, I second this bill and ask members, please let's support this bill. Let's fast track the bill so that as soon as the House passes in the committee of the whole, with amendments, of course, because I know there are several amendments that are coming up, because we have had consultations with the Ministry of ICT, we've had engagements with stakeholders, we've had engagements also with Konza itself, and they have told us, because I'm a member of the committee, that they really need this bill to be passed so that it can be enacted into law. Madam Speaker, I know the bill will have to go to the other house, the National Assembly, and we hope and pray that the National Assembly are going to support this bill so that we don't see issues that arose in the 12th Parliament, where Senate came up with a bill, Data Protection Bill, but along the way, The one that came from Senate looked like it was stepped down, and there is one that was brought also through a Senate. So, Madam Speaker, it is good to move with speed and ensure the bill is passed. With those very many remarks, Madam Speaker, I wish to second and request our colleagues, let us support this bill so that at least Konza can get investors, because now as we speak, now most investors are not willing basically to come because there is no law in place. You know, you can't come and invest without, I mean, you can lose your money, you can lose your funds. So, Madam Speaker, I wish to second the bill.
The Honourable Senator. Honourable Senators, I propose the question that the Konza Technopolis Bill, Senate Bills number 2 of 2023, be read a second time. I now call upon Senator Danson Mungatana to contribute to this motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to make my contribution to the Konza Technopolis Bill 2023. Madam Speaker, may I take this first opportunity to thank Senator Gloria for the work she has put in this, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I know that there have been a lot of hurdles along the way. That there have been frustrations along the way. But I want to thank the Honorable Senator for staying focused and bringing this bill to this stage. Madam Speaker, I wanted to stand in support of this bill and say that I share the views of previous speakers on this bill, and I pray that other senators who will speak to this bill will support this bill. Madam Speaker, there is something that I see in a lot of the bills that we bring, that a lot of clauses, Madam Speaker, and I hope Senator Gloria will have a chance to relook at this. We bring law, Madam Speaker, but when you look at that law, it talks on the authority of the board or the organization that is being created under that law, and you will find clauses after clauses after clauses. They are just speaking on the board, or if it's an authority that is being created, they are just speaking on the authority that is being created. And this is like a repetition. It happens many times that honorable members who bring the bills, they sort of shift away from the main purpose of the bill. And this also has suffered the same. Madam Speaker, I want the sponsor of the bill, Senator Gloria, to go and see how many more clauses they can add to the functions and the purpose, the main purpose of this bill. Madam Speaker, I want to propose that amongst the things that should be added here for purposes of clarity, there is clause 5, subclause 2, and it goes to P. It talks about promote and market locally and internationally opportunities for investment in information and communications technology and industrial activities in the technopolis. Madam Speaker, this Senate must continually speak about counties. must openly promote counties. So it would not have hurt this bill in any way by stating that even activities of counties, opportunities that exist within counties, should be part and parcel of what is being promoted through the technopolis that is being created here. Madam Speaker, it is clear that counties can make great contribution in terms of being a source for the markets that will be created within the technopolis. So that if county like Tana River produces a lot of mangoes, there ought to be a mention within the activities of the technopolis that from the 47 counties, all these entities and investors who are coming to invest here, you have opportunity to get fish from Tana River. You have opportunity to get mangoes from Tana River. You have opportunities to get rice from Tana River, so that the activities of this technopolis do not become theoretical to the rest of the countries and our counties. Madam Speaker, it is critical that this technopolis, as it is being created, we find within the law a system of reporting back on the activities they are carrying. Madam Speaker, sometimes we have formed here authorities, we have created activities, but there's no benchmarking for those authorities. There's no reporting back mechanism. And so you see, like today, we were talking about the victims charter during the earlier on in the Senate session, that a board has been set up, and it's not an independent board, and that board fails to report to anybody, and then we see nothing is going on, and citizens start petitioning the Senate here that something needs to be done. So even this one, we should have a reporting mechanism so that whatever it is that they have achieved, we should be able as a Senate to receive reports, because this is a government effort, and there must be a reporting back mechanism. There must be a way in which we can say that all the money, all the incentives that have been put there, there has been a return back. And one of the return back was this and the other. Madam Speaker, still sticking on the activities, we have to create clauses that speak to the existence of our counties. And Madam Speaker, within this particular Kenya Konza Technopolis bill, we would want a clause created that would be speaking specifically to the Konza Technopolis, creating opportunities in ICT for development in counties, in county governments, in counties which are outside the 3 counties where this technopolis is situated. So that part of the reporting mechanism must be said that in Turkana County, this and this has been done as maybe part of the CRS for the Konza Technopolis bill. We must make this requirement so that they have the thinking embedded in law and within them, that they have gone outside the 3 counties where they are located to promote technology, to promote ICT,
and to be able to do the functions, amongst others, promotion of ICT across the country. I have looked at clause 6, and we are saying that there is all these permanent secretaries that have been put up as members of this management of the authority and the board. When you look at this list, Madam Speaker, again, it's so, it is speaking to a national body and very little about counties. In fact, we have only 2 persons who are nominated from the opposite gender by the Council of County Governors. Madam Speaker, I think we need to possibly add more members who should be recruited in a competitive manner. And Madam Speaker, I want to repeat again that when they are choosing the board of management, we should have a fair spread so that we don't have the 2 persons of the opposite gender, for example, nominated by the Council of Governors coming from the same county. We don't have the CEO, who is an ex-officio member of the board, coming again from the same counties. We don't have also the one person appointed by the cabinet secretary coming from the same county. It has happened, Madam Speaker, in other authorities where you will find that there is no spread. So, Madam Speaker, I propose Senator Gloria to consider looking at putting a clause that will ensure that there is fair spread across the county in terms of selection of who should be sitting there. Madam Speaker, there is the clause 8, which speaks to the qualifications for the chairperson of the board. And it seems like there is a fixed requirement for 15 years experience in information technology, development of special economic zones, science, parks, infrastructure, and so on. And there is, to me, a very gaping hole when you say that someone must have at least 15 years experience in finance, economics, or tax. This seems to be the same genre. And yet, someone who has practiced information and communication technology law for the last 10 years, 20 years, you have left them out. So I think we should increase the requirements to make it inclusive of law, so that instead of just having finance, economics, or tax, we should say finance, economics, or law. Madam Speaker, that goes for all the board members as well. But critically, when it comes to the recruitment of staff, which is in the proposed clause 18, I was going to propose to Senator Gloria, the sponsor of this bill, that this being a Senate bill, and the Senate being the place where we promote counties, let us find wording that will make sure that there is a spread in terms of staff across the nation. If we leave it the way it is, staff are most likely going to be recruited from Nairobi County
and the 3 counties, Makwiny and so on, Machakos and so on, that are within the Konza technopolis area, so that people from Tana River County can have an opportunity to work there. People from Turkana, Mandera, Mombasa, people from Vihiga and so on can also have an opportunity to work in this technopolis. We forget that when we don't encourage deliberate spread, what tends to happen is Nairobi tends to dominate almost everything. And if it is located within Machakos area, what would happen also is after Machakos, after Nairobi, most of the staff will come from Machakos. So let us find wording like it is in cabinet, that there should be a reasonable geographical spread, even gender and other considerations, so that this bill, which is coming from the Senate, should have that trademark of Senate, that we are defenders of our county governments. Madam Speaker, I'm talking now on the part 3 of this bill, which talks about the regulation and the licensing. It says that if someone has applied within 7 days, they should be given the results. I think 7 days on a practical basis is not enough. We should increase that to make it 21 days, so that if there's any reason the board cannot meet, for example now, Madam Speaker, we have had maandamanos that have disrupted the way things would work. Now, we can have any other issues, even natural calamities. Madam Speaker, if you say within 7 days, and then these 7 days are not met, you are exposing the board to legal liabilities for absolutely no reason. So I would encourage that we increase these numbers to the normal 21 days, so that we don't expose the board to unnecessary difficulties. I'm also going to mention here that there are provisions on denial of license to operate within this zone. And more important, there are provisions, and I'm looking at article, proposed section 31, that the board can actually, 30 and 31, that the board can revoke a license issued to Konza Technopolis Enterprise if several other issues are raised. I want to say that if investors are putting in millions of shillings, in fact, maybe some will put in billions of shillings, we have to be very careful that we do not create situations where people are going to be afraid to come. Let us make it difficult for a board or a minister or anyone to come and say, I'm revoking your license after I've put up a very serious investment in the Konza Technopolis area, and we've invested millions of shillings. I've done stuff, I've done this, I've employed, and then you come and say, I'm giving you a notice of non-compliance. I think this section should be relooked. And how I propose you look at it is, there are international corporations that you are targeting and attracting to that area. Have them come for the public participation in this bill. I know, for instance, that Microsoft is already in Kenya. And I know some young people who are earning, very big salaries, maybe higher, much higher than even sitting members of Parliament or even the President of the Republic. And they're employed by international organizations like Microsoft. Microsoft is already here. Microsoft, of course, I believe they would want to go to Konza Technopolis when this becomes a reality. And I believe that other tech companies will come. And when they come, they would want good working conditions. I would really encourage my colleague to find a way of putting these already operational mega companies that might be attracted there to come for public participation. Let them look at some of these provisions. Are these provisions business friendly? You know, there's no even a provision for, you know, negotiation in case there are some infractions on the licensing requirements. There's no really, you know, a way to...
Senator Danson, I will give you 1 more minute to finish that statement.
There's no a way of amicable settlement, Madam Speaker, to sort out problems which may arise within this technopolis. Let us not give too much power to the board. Let us give the investors who are going to create jobs for our young people the opportunity to be comfortable as they work in this area. With those many remarks, Madam Speaker, I support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Chiralike can take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want from the onset to support this wonderful bill by Senator Gloria Orwoba. I know she has undergone a lot of challenges until finally this bill has come to the floor. This is one of the bills that has generated interest and a lot of express of individuals who don't want to be held accountable. I'm happy. Finally, the Konza Technopolis Bill 2023, and I want to thank Senator Gloria Orwoba. I can see she's seizing the moment. She's doing a wonderful job, and I think for us who have been around for some time, we can only tell her the future is bright. Madam Speaker, I almost say Madam Speaker, sir, I heard a colleague of mine saying that. I know, my apologies. Madam Speaker, the issue of Konza Technopolis, the future of many nations is the ICT. ICT is one of the versatile technologies, one of the versatile areas that it will keep changing, Madam Speaker, in many aspects. It will keep changing. It is one of the lucrative businesses. It is, technology runs obsolete, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, but as we talk today, the Republic of Kenya is yet to benefit from aspects of technological development and business. Madam Speaker, I appreciate the fact that many universities are offering and they are doing, giving out technological courses, the future of smart cities. And I'm happy and I want to laud the President because smart cities have been given to each and every county, Madam Speaker. And one of them is Konza Technopolis, which we wanted to be the hub, to be the one that will breed and ensure that they babysit most of the smart cities and economic processing zone that we are going to have in this country, including aggregation centers. Madam Speaker, even buying spaces where I've seen counties, Madam Speaker, that have lost vital documents because of lack of places where they store these important technological, Madam Speaker. We have had cases where some of the organizations like Safaricom, Madam Speaker, are keeping their data away from the country, therefore denying us the important revenue. Like Meta, Madam Speaker, which runs Facebook among other social media pages. We hardly get anything from them. Yet many Kenyans, we are the leading country that uses internet, Madam Speaker. And therefore, we must tell these companies, including Meta, to account and to pay for us taxes to fix our economy, Madam Speaker. We cannot allow them to run away, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, you remember when Elon Musk, one of the, is it the richest? You know, there's a difference being richer and wealthier. You know, when you are wealthy, you are happy, your things are okay, your children are happy, your wife is happy, Madam Speaker. You know, I'm told in Nairobi, when, you know, your spouse is unfair or is unhappy, you hear some songs and utensils being thrown here and there, and then you know there is no peace that way in the house, Madam Speaker. But you should be wealthy when you have your God, your children are happy, your spouse is happy. That is now being wealthy. But I'm told the richest man on earth, Elon Musk, who happens to come from Africa, bought Twitter. And you remember, Madam Speaker, they were crazy. Why we were being told, can you get the blue, the Twitter badge? And we were paying. Personally, I paid for it for the authentication, Madam Speaker, and I was charged in dollars. I wish the dollars I was paying for my Twitter verification blue badge. At least some taxes would have gone to be taxed for government, to build roads, to give ICT and digital economy opportunities to many young people, Madam Speaker. You have had the President, His Excellency, the beloved President, His Excellency, Dr. William RUTO, I said we want to create digital jobs for young people across 290 constituencies and create what we call ICT hubs. Madam Speaker, we know Konza has been run before like an organization of witchcraft and sorcery. Madam Speaker, they have not been open. We are calling them out, Madam Speaker. They are getting billions and billions of shillings, but when the legislation comes in place, wants to regulate the activities, they go haywire, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think it is a high time that the country, and I saw in the Finance Act that was passed unanimously by this Parliament, Madam Speaker, one of the aspects is to tax some of the aspects of content creators, which is okay, because it will assist in regulating the industry and also providing services, Madam Speaker. In the Finance Act, I know that matter came up before the court, Madam Speaker, and I'm happy you are holding brief and you make strong submissions. It is that, Madam Speaker, some of these arms of government have what we call state capture. Madam Speaker, although we wanted orders to be vacated, I have seen there is a bench that has been constituted. Madam Speaker, that Finance Act is trying to be creative in getting taxes. We want a creative economy to thrive. Also, we want taxes to be creative. And therefore, we need to move to digital economy. And one of the aspects is ensuring that Konza technopolis does not exist in isolation. Why is it an offense, Madam Speaker, for Konza technopolis to be held account? Why are some individuals don't want? Konza technopolis does not exist outside Kenya. It's part of Kenya. It must be regulated. And I'm happy that Senator Gloria Roba has taken the bull by its horns, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is a woman of steel, Madam Speaker. I don't want to say she has what we normally say on the corridor. But, Madam Speaker, this is the first time we want to regulate properly the legal framework. And I heard my brother, like the function of authority, a development plan for technopolis, Madam Speaker, initiate the formulation policies and strategies, facilitate, monitor, and evaluate development, Madam Speaker. And therefore, I agree that the powers of authority also, we must ensure that the powers of authority do not come. Madam Speaker, there is a famous saying in the French Revolution, that absolute power corrupts absolutely, Madam Speaker. This is what is happening in Konza. We don't want people who do, Madam Speaker, I only have a problem. Why is it an offense to take account for you for using taxpayers' money? I thought everybody in this country should be having, Madam Speaker, when, for example, you are called to account for the money that public gives you. This is a public entity. Madam Speaker, we know of many companies, Huawei, many companies like Samsung and many others have pitched tent in Konza. Kenyans must get value. And the only way to get value, Madam Speaker, you are a learned senior in this profession, you cannot tax something that there is no legal framework. We want Konza technopolis to have a legal framework going into the future, Madam Speaker. And therefore, I'm happy But I want to urge Senator Gloria, when it comes to the third, let us include counties. We want counties to be part of this, Madam Speaker. We want counties to benefit. I would have expected in the board, Madam Speaker, that at least we ensure a representative from Council of Governors, and of course the upper house, the Senate, should be part of the board of the authority. Because I have seen anywhere the ICT minister in terms of Wi-Fi and many others, Madam Speaker, is to ensure that, you know, I had a ruling in the upshot when this matter came up, when the Mutunga CJ, I don't remember the proper citation, he was asking, when you want to do a budget implementation, do you implement within a county or outside the boundaries of the county? Because counties are within Kenya. We have 47 county governments, one indivisible people, one nation, Madam Speaker. And therefore, I expect the representatives of the COG to be here on this board. I expect the Senate to be represented, or the Parliament, so that we can be effective in terms of the board authority that we has, Madam Speaker. Because, Madam Speaker, Senator is one of us in the Kenya Kwanza coalition, and the ruling party, of course, Madam Speaker, is one of us. And she is aware of the position of the government and Kenya Kwanza and President William RUTO, that we are going to ensure we have digital jobs. We are going to have ICT hubs in 290 constituencies across the country, and 47 county governments, of course. So therefore, counties becomes an important. And you know, Senate is, we, under Article 96, we represent the interest of the counties. And therefore, this being our baby, this is we can decide how this baby will grow, Madam Speaker. We can either take to the international schools or the normal schools, or even do not go to school. So we need to ensure, and I know Senator Gloria is open, she's open for many ideas to enrich the bill. So I expect now that we will look at that so that we also defend. And Madam Speaker, I'm also aware that some individuals have run to National Assembly to try and duplicate the bill. Madam Speaker, I've had people arguing about Article 113, money bill, excuses, writing concurrence letter, Madam Speaker. I can tell you, as a parliament under Article 93 of the Constitution, each and every one of us has an opportunity, Madam Speaker, to generate a bill. Unless, Madam Speaker, and I want to propose, because you sit in Senate Business Committee, if we want to work together with National Assembly, which is the lower house, we can agree on co-sponsoring, where you have a senator sponsoring a bill, and then we have a colleague in the National Assembly. That is how we'll enrich the role of Parliament that we have, Madam Speaker. I am aware, and let us ask National Assembly, they should not be excited in fighting us. They have tried to fight us before, but we have won. Madam Speaker, in 2013, this House, on the division of revenue, we won. When I was the chair, when you was truly, was one of the powerful chairs in the last session, the chairperson of Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights. I'm the chairperson emeritus, Madam Speaker. We moved and we did pleadings with your department. We have defeated them in courts of law. As we are not interested with the fight in the courts of law, we want to work for Kenyans. The only way we can work for Kenyans is that you don't need to duplicate a bill. You appear as a brilliant fool, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the one I wanted to on the powers of the board, just in quick succession. Of course, I agree with a number of, but I want to ask Senator Gloria, because he's one of us, he's a youthful person, to at least not put too much 10 years and a lot, just put around 5 years. I remember when we were pushing, Madam Speaker, the County Attorney Act, and we had push and pull. People wanted 10 years experience as a lawyer to be a county attorney, but we told them, some counties in this republic, you don't even get a lawyer. So what we did, we pulled down up to 5 years experience. So I want to ask, even in board experience, Senator Gloria, at least relook at the age and the experience so that we can have more youthful people. And you know, Kenya is one of the IT hubs, Madam Speaker, that we can do. At least, and of course, want to ensure that the common seal of the authority should be there. Of course, the form of licenses, class license, revoking them. Madam Speaker, what I would request on clause number 30, revocation of a license, is I want to call upon that, for example, clause number 31, the board shall, before revoking a license, issue to Konza technopolis enterprise notice in a prescribed form But of course, I know that you can review the High Court, which is important. I think that is important, so that we don't have powers by the board that do not have powers that can be relooked at, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on the issue of licensing, register of license, among others, Madam Speaker, I think these are things we agree on. Madam Speaker, the only aspect I want to conclude, because I have only 2 points to conclude, is clause number 46 on the accounts and the audit. I request that once in a while, when these reports are taken to Auditor General, the authority should also appear before Parliament. As Parliament, and I want to ask Senator Gloria to be careful not to use National Assembly, to say Parliament, so that this authority can appear before the Senate and before the National Assembly. And therefore, since this is our making, Madam Speaker, and therefore, of course, the board will go in that direction. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, this is what we want to do as a nation. As we said earlier on, Kenyans have elected all of us, Madam Speaker, to come and sit in this house. I don't know any other reason an elected member of Parliament, be it a senator and member of National Assembly, to go on the streets or to go on the villages, yet people elected them to sit here. Today, Madam Speaker, we are working. The nation is working. It's a normal working day. Madam Speaker, if you have divergent of the opinion, come to the floor of the House and give us a policy or legislation intervention the way Senator Gloria Orwoba has done. That is how we move this country, Madam Speaker. We cannot move this country by going to the streets and making noise. We are not powerless. We exercise authority as provided by the Constitution on behalf of Kenyans. So if there is any alternative, Madam Speaker, is the alternative of giving Kenyans leadership and doing our work, Madam Speaker. And therefore, I want to call upon our colleagues. Let us be in Parliament. I've seen some of them yesterday. They were saying Parliament. I want to tell the country, because I saw many people in social media saying there is maandamano in Senate. There is no maandamano in Senate. Which maandamano? And we are discharging our constitutional mandate, Madam Speaker. Those are people who are excited on social media. And it is not new that the minority side, Azimio and Kenya, they have always worked out. Even when you were being elected as the Speaker of this House, they worked and the House has moved on, Madam Speaker. I want to call upon the country. I have seen the clergy are saying the President and the former Premier should sit to discuss what? Elections was done and dusted. There is a constitutionally, democratically elected government in place. Then, Madam Speaker, what is the value of elections in future? Why should we go to an election? We must tell this country and be honest. Let us have honest conversation. And I want to ask the clergy and people who are doing clarion call for engagement. What should we engage about, Madam Speaker? Then why should we not have an election, Madam Speaker? Why don't we sit as political class somewhere in Chinyamiti, somewhere in some village, be it from Nyamira, where Senator Gloria Orwoba comes from, in Kisii County, sorry, sit somewhere Chinyamiti, Madam Speaker, and say, let us share the seats. Why should we disturb Kenyans after every 4 years? We sell our agenda, we sell our manifesto, we campaign, we use resources. And then after that year, Madam Speaker, we come and tell the nation we don't agree. Then there is no value of elections, Madam Speaker. Me, there is people I defeated in general election. Can I negotiate with them for power sharing deal? No. Because Kenyans, when they go to elect somebody, they don't elect because of just electing, Madam Speaker. So I want to ask, because sometimes, Madam Speaker, in conclusion, I see a lot of ignorance. Ignorance, Madam Speaker, by individuals who just want to say, negotiate. What should we negotiate about? And therefore, Madam Speaker, with those very, very many remarks, this is a wonderful bill. I want to ask Senator Gloria and the Senate to hold this bill dearly. This is our baby. We should not allow anybody to snatch. And we will not sit somewhere where somebody will tell us, can you divide the baby into two? We will not allow that to happen. Will not allow, even the biblical principle did not allow that. So are we allowing our baby to be divided into two, Madam Speaker? Let the members of National Assembly generate their own bills. And if they lack the intelligence and capacity and ability, I always give pro bono legal services on drafting of the bills. They can look for me. With those many remarks, congratulate Senator, wish her well. We hope to see the President assenting this to law, and of course, Konza Technopolis to be held accountable because they use taxpayers. With those many remarks, I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Chiradige. Senator Madago Jackson.
Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. First, let me say I rise to support the Konza Technopolis Act by Senator Gloria. And Madam Speaker, this act or piece of legislation has come at the right time in this country when the Kenya Kwanza administration wants to roll out a very robust use of technology in terms of service delivery for government services, and also roll out digital infrastructure to enable the private sector and the business community to be able to transact business on the technology platform, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this bill is going to bring sanity in the industry. And Madam Speaker, the bill is going to generate revenue for the country. And as a nation who aspires to depend on themselves in terms of managing their own internal affairs, Madam Speaker, this bill is going to be among the bills that is going to enable government begin generating revenue in areas they have not been able to do so in the past. Madam Speaker, as you are aware, Kenya government and Kenya people lose a lot of taxes through technology and business opportunities that we've not been able to generate revenue because of lack of legal framework. Madam Speaker, today in this nation, data is being traded across the globe while Kenya earns nothing from that trade. Madam Speaker, you realize that mobile operators in this country, some of them have their termination centers for international calls outside this country. And we are aware that those who are trying to ask the National Assembly to develop a parallel bill and act, Madam Speaker, are actually being sponsored by those who are not interested in this nation putting sanity in the data industry of this nation. And therefore, Madam Speaker, we support this bill because it's not only going to create sanity and make sure that the process of data transfer, the release of private data, will be properly addressed and governed in law. And this nation is going to earn a lot of revenue. Madam Speaker, even as we process this bill, this House has another bill for startups, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, the bills for startup and the Konza Technopolis. The Konza Technopolis bill, Madam Speaker, should actually come before we finalize on the startup bill, because this is going to be the enabler of young people in the innovation sector, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, and that is why earlier in this House today, Madam Speaker, I asked that as the Budget Committee looks at the ACPO, access to business by the preserved groups, Madam Speaker, there is need to review, because when it comes to the technology space, Madam Speaker, you don't need to have been 10 years in the industry to innovate or develop a software or a system that can address a certain problem that exists. We therefore want to support this bill because it is also going to be an enabler to our young people, to innovators in terms of technology, and those who want to trade on the digital platform by making sure that we have a regulated industry, we have an institution that can be accountable to Parliament and to the people of Kenya. The revenue that we have lost over time, Madam Speaker, even from the very popular platforms we use on social media, will now be within the purview of this government to earn that revenue, and we transfer that money for use in developing this nation. With those remarks, Madam Speaker, I wish to say I support this act and want to urge the members of National Assembly to avoid divisionary tactics and avoid being compromised by merchants who want to ensure that this country remains in disarray in terms of technology, and allow this bill to proceed so that the country, innovators, and people who want to use the digital space to do business can be enabled. With that, I support.
Thank you, Senator Madago. There are no more senators who wish to contribute to the bill, so I call upon the mover, Senator Gloria, to reply.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to move. Madam Speaker, since I tabled this bill in Parliament, it is true that I've received a lot of pushback from various industries. And we know that the data industry is a multi-billion industry with a lot of cartels and many people who do not want good for this country. Madam Speaker, there was even a point where the bill was actually being dropped, and I raised some concerns in terms of how the committee was dealing with the bill, and I'm excited that we are now on the second reading, because there has been a lot of, it's been a very long journey to get to this point. Madam Speaker, just as Senator Mandago has said, there are many people who have been making a lot of money out of the data that Kenyans generate. We have companies in the data industry that are actually making billions of profits and are not remitting any taxes to Kenya. We have set up the infrastructure as a government in the name of Konza. We have even put out incentives in terms of those who are willing to set up BPOs and manufacturing plants in this country. But our policy and our legal frameworks are actually against the Kenyans who are working here and in these industries. So this bill is not only going to be an eye-opener for most of the youth who are actually not making money out of this, but this bill is going to be, let me say, the gateway to finally be able to tax most of these companies. Of all the social media companies that we have operating, where Kenyans are producing the highest content, Kenyans are giving the numbers in terms of East Africa, in terms of Africa, all these social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, TikTok, even WhatsApp, which is even being used to mobilize, which is being used as a platform for businesses. Right now we have demonstrations. You will see that WhatsApp is being abused and used to push for certain illegalities. All these companies, none of them are able to remit taxes because they are not registered in Kenya. Recently I was in Kigali for a Women Deliver conference about women empowerment. And we were struggling around the logistics of transport, how to get from point A to point B. And I simply asked my fellow colleagues who are with me, why can't we just call for an Uber? And it was shocking to find out that Uber does not operate in Rwanda. Why? Because the Rwanda government has ensured that all the data that is being generated, even by the digital taxi apps, is stored locally. So if the Rwanda government can actually legislate and ensure and implement that their data is stored locally, to push the data center industry, to push security, because when our data is being stored out there, we don't even know who is trading. We know that there are third-party service providers who are actually trading on our data. Then it is possible for us as a country, as Kenya, to legislate and clean up this industry. This bill is just the first step of many steps that we need to take in order to regulate this industry. I have tabled another bill in the name of, dubbed the Data Protection Bill, where we are actually, I'm trying to push that we locally store our data. But in the absence of the Konza technopolis bill, then we are lost in general. Many bills are going to be tabled, many innovative bills are going to be brought here, but in the absence of the legal framework that we are trying to put, that is going to be scaled up to all the counties, then we are actually not able to legislate effectively. So, Madam Speaker, I think it is time that we say no to these cartels out there. It is time that as a government, we make the hard decisions. And the hard decision is We need to regulate this industry. We need a legal framework for Konza or any other technopolis that is going to be across the nation. And we need to look into the space of digital content creation, innovation. We need to look into the online space and regulate it. Madam Speaker, today as we are here in chambers, there are so many things that are happening online that are actually pushing for the instability of this country. We are talking about people who are creating fake accounts to incite the public and push them out to this, what they are calling the mandamanos. Madam Speaker, it is not only because we do not have legislation that can actually ensure that we have convictions of these criminals, because that is what they are. We have to start from a place of understanding that any industry that exists must be regulated. There has to be some form of oversight. Konza can no longer exist in oblivion. It can no longer operate moonlighting. We need accountability, we need oversight, we need legal frameworks, and this bill actually sets out to ensure that the same is achieved. Madam Speaker, I know that some of the feedback we are getting is how to push further that the county governments are more involved. That is feedback that I've taken from Senator Mungatana, from Senator Cherargei and Senator Mandago, that we look into the committee and how to assert the county level. That's something that we'll take in. In terms of the 10 years, the years that are needed in terms of being a chair or a board member or the CEO, it has actually been my concern. I raised it with the committee. Again, as I said, it's been very difficult, Madam Speaker, to even relay me as the sponsor. As the sponsor of this bill, I have repeatedly to the committee and to stakeholders that are involved said that the 10 years minimum qualification is actually not what I fronted. There is also an issue of the qualifications of the CEO, that they must have a degree. Madam Speaker, we are moving to competence-based education. We are moving to ensure that our informal skilled workers are able to thrive and prosper and get to spaces where they can actually have impact. We have had the situation where we have changed our curriculum such that now it is not about churning out papers and degrees, but it is about the skills and competencies. I have relayed the same information to the committee when we had a conversation with the committee, and I said, I feel that the number of years that is being stipulated as a minimum qualification to be the CEO or the chair, I said I felt that it is very, that it's keeping out our youth who could have the competencies. And I have also said that the minimum qualifications being a degree, what are we saying to our TVET youth? What are we telling them? That after they go to pursue their technical education and vocational education, that we are locking out the same from jobs. So I've said this to the committee. But as I said, this bill has been a very difficult bill to even table because the stakeholders involved, including the ICT committee, it's been very difficult. And I want to celebrate the fact that we've reached the second reading, but I don't want to lose sight of what the bill was intended to do. So that is something that I will pick up. Madam Speaker, I think with those few remarks, for me, my intention of this bill is to push the local job creation for our Kenyans, our youth. The intention is to also ensure that we have oversight for any monies that are being taken out of the exchequer by any authority or individual. And I think also for purposes of continuity and scaling up our innovation centers that we need this legal framework. And I hope that while we're pushing for this, that is actually going to be seen by those who are going to interact with the bill. It is an issue of safeguarding our spaces, ensuring that we don't export our jobs to servers abroad, and ensuring that investors who want to come and pump in money have the security of operating with a legal framework. With those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I beg that pursuant to Standing Order 66.3, I request that you put on hold the question to be deferred to a later date.
Thank you, Senator Gloria Uruoba. The putting of the question is deferred to next week, Tuesday at 2:30. We are going to I'm going to reorganize the order paper now, and I'll request the clerk to call out order number 17.
Order number 17, motion. Incorporation of intelligent water management systems in building plans for sustainable living.
There is resumption of debate on this motion. I do not see any senators interested in debating this motion, so we will defer this motion to next week, Tuesday at 2:30. For the mover to come and reply to this motion. Clerk, please call out the next order, order number 11.
Order number 11, the Agriculture and Food Authority Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 13 of 2023, second reading.
The mover of this motion, Senator James Murango, is equally not there. I direct that the same be deferred to next week, Tuesday at 2:30. Please call out, clerk, call out order number 12.
Order number 12, the Equalization Fund Administration Bill, Senate Bills number 14 of 2023, second reading.
The chairperson, Standing Committee on Finance and Budget. I do not see him in the house today, and I direct that the same be deferred to next week, Tuesday at 2:30. Order number 13.
The County Licensing Uniform Procedures, order number 13, the County Licensing Uniform Procedures Bill, Senate Bills number 9 of 2022, second reading.
Senator Mariam Sheikh Omar, I do not see her in chambers today, and I direct that this be deferred to next week, Tuesday at 2:30. Order number 14.
Order number 14, the Tea Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 1 of 2023, second reading.
Senator Wakili Hilali Sigei, he was here earlier in the day. I do not see him in chambers now. I direct that the same be deferred to next week, Tuesday at 2:30. Order number 16.
Order number 16, the County Boundaries Bill, Senate Bills number 6 of 2023, second reading.
Senator Moses Kajwang, equally, he is not in chambers now. I direct that the same be listed next week on Tuesday at 2:30.
Order number 18, motion, report of the delegation of the Senate delegation to the 67th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, CSW 67, held in New York from 6th to 17th March 2023.
Senator Fatuma Dulo is not in chambers right now. I direct that this motion be deferred to Tuesday next week at 2:30. Honorable Senators, we rise. Honorable Senators, there being no other business on the order paper, the Senate stands adjourned until Tuesday, 25th July 2023 at 2:30 p.m.
A very good morning to you, wherever you are watching us from. We are coming to you live from Parliament buildings in Nairobi. It is Wednesday, 19th July 2023, and in a short while we shall be linking up with members of the Senate as they engage in matters legislation. And Wednesday morning is a sitting day introduced for purposes of considering the questions and statements segment of the business of the Senate, and this speaks to cabinet secretaries appearing in the plenary to answer to various queries as presented by senators. And this morning, expected in the Senate is the Cabinet Secretary Education, Ezekiel Machogu, who I can confirm is within the presence of Parliament. And this morning, he is expected to be answering 8 questions from senators regarding the education sector. The first is from the nominated Senator George Mbogwa. His question revolves around the delay in review of the Basic Education Act of the year 2013 that seeks to align it with the Constitution and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The other question is from nominated Senator Joyce Korir. Her question regards a project, a construction of a library block of hostels, a multi-purpose hall, and lecture halls at Bomet University. She says this project has stalled for the last 1 year. Nominated Senator Peris Tobiko also has a question, Secretary, and this one speaks to the attire of Muslim students in some public schools, and she claims they're not allowed to wear the hijab and trousers in addition to the prescribed school uniform. And here she is addressing the female learners, and she has specifically cited the Kenya High School and Alliance Girls High School as some of the schools that are denying. And his third question is concerning a lifestyle audit conducted last year on senior officers at the Teachers Service Commission, TSC, including the Chief Executive Officer.